reason Sabrina Carpenter's album cover is bothering me, particularly in tandem with Sydney Sweetie's Soap, is that these white, blonde, like beauty standard women have more space to express their sexuality and to be subjugated to things that are dehumanizing without being treated as less than human. And it gets to a point where it feels like a flaunt. And I think that's something I haven't been able to really verbalize, but it gets to a point where it feels like you're a little bit flexing your privilege of being able to like show yourself being grabbed by your hair while like Cassie's going through the Diddy trial. And I think of that. And I also think of Snoop Dogg's like the Doghouse cover. I always think of that.
Sabrina Carpenter recently released a song a few days ago called Man-Child that was clearly criticizing men. And then a few days later, she dropped this new album art and is being accused of misogyny. Oh, how the turntable.
Opportunity. And it certainly seems that this entire week has been a learning opportunity for the feminists online.
So Sabrina Carpenter's new song just dropped, and she's already getting dragged online for allegedly using an ableist slur.
Miss Sabrina Carpenter. She has been recording and writing music for quite a while now, but really since she had Mi Espresso pop off commercially in the way that she has.
And if we look at it, I'm not gonna lie, it is very, very interesting, but at the same time, yeah, I do kind of get why people are mad. You remember when she was doing those concerts last year when she would do the sex positions, like pretending to suck meat or doing the Eiffel Tower or even actually getting quote unquote cracked on stage behind some curtains? Yeah, you remember that, man. I do too, especially by me. But basically, it's the same thing from last year. People are just mad that she's being over-sexual.
And obviously, this is a bit sexual. She is kneeling in front of a man. He is holding her hair, but she is fully clothed, so I'll take that. You know, that is a win in 2025.
This is a new photo from Rolling Stone because the second that her new album art dropped, so did this photo, and this is a new cover photo of Rolling Stone that basically looks like Playboy. But this is normal on Rolling Stone, I guess. Also, AOC was mentioned on that cover, so that tracks with what Rolling Stone is all about these days.
Breaking news, Sabrina Carpenter is throwing people into a tailspin again. The replies on Sabrina Carpenter's Instagram post say, "Is this a humiliation ritual? What the hell is this cover?" Over 32,000 likes.
That is very disturbing, Serena.
Explain to me again how this isn't centering men, how this isn't catering to the male gaze. Over 29,000 likes.
You know what I'm saying? Especially when you're somebody who's like into old school hip hop and you heard the way they were allowed to talk about women then. We're really not that far away from that. We're really not that far away from women not being able to have credit cards in 75.
A lot of women have a problem with that because they think that she's pandering to men by doing that, or pandering to the male gaze, which, duh, of course she's doing. But doing things like that makes you something called a pick-me in the women community. And I'm letting you know right now, girlies hate pick-me's with all of their heart.
And there is also, keep in mind, a juxtaposition going on here with, yes, again, the cover and the hair pulling and the title Man's Best Friend, like, oh, look at me, I'm being treated like a dog.
One tweet that's racked up nearly 50,000 likes read, "Women face horrific domestic abuse and degradation at the hands of men every single day worldwide. But she wants to profit off of imagery of herself being degraded, comparing herself to a dog. Pandering to men will never be feminist. I don't care if the lyrics say men. Makes me feel ill knowing her fans will spin this to make it feminist."
But the feminists online, they are accusing this. They are accusing Sabrina Carpenter of being too sexual and setting women and feminists back. This photo is what has really ruined feminism for all women. But it isn't just Sabrina Carpenter that they are saying this about. The other person that is setting women back is Sydney Sweeney and her bathwater.
Today's episode, in the worst news you've ever heard, the Sydney Sweeney bathwater soap sold out not in minutes, but in seconds.
And then also, why is a professional company, a soap company, selling this? Why? Who did they have to bribe to agree to do this? How is this even FDA regulated? Most importantly, whose horny ass came up with this idea? Because whoever that man is, his laptop needs to be checked by the FBI.
She is an actress that is like, not just like an A-list actress, she is her generation's like top bombshell. Like, people have been freaking out and lusting over Sydney Sweeney for a long time, and it is pretty creepy.
Now, Sydney's only making 5,000 of the specialty bars, and it's unclear if it's actually her legit used water in them or just the idea of that.
Who at Netflix gave this poster the green light?
I get the album might not be about how the album cover looks, but this still gives off not the right vibes even so. It's not too late to change the cover. Even if this is satire, it's so tone deaf and demeaning. You said, oh. Oh, Streets is saying you need to get up, mamas. That comment just made me laugh. Someone else said, it's giving Bonnie Blue vibes. Is it? Interesting. Someone else said, no shade, but y'all can't keep pretending that she doesn't do this for the male gaze. She doesn't. It's female empowerment, guys. Purely female empowerment.
Right. There's a bunch of dudes. You know what? What am I saying? It's nobody's bath.
It's nobody. Ain't nobody. They making batches of soap water and putting her name on there. This is so dumb, y'all. All right.
She's 26. I'm 27, right? I did grow up Catholic, so I always check myself. I always check my prudence. Like, I really, really do try to. But if this is the ground, where are we going from here?
So Netflix has a bit of a problem on their hands. They added one movie, and now people are canceling their subscriptions left and right, signing petitions to get it removed, and even United States lawmakers have stepped up, and they're trying to get the Department of Justice involved.
And I don't blame anyone, it just straight up looks like child just straight up looks like baby strippers.
The French film Cuties is in legal trouble. A Texas grand jury has indicted Netflix for promoting lewd visuals of a child in the French film. That is directly from the court documents, those words. Now, the Tyler County's district attorney's office filed a document last month accusing Netflix of promoting material depicting minors in a sexual way. It also claims the material holds no, quote, literary, artistic, political, or scientific value.
The trailer has 1.8 million dislikes, #cancel Netflix was trending on Twitter, and petitions to stop the film from releasing had reached over 500,000 signatures at the time, and nobody outside of France had even seen the film. That's when the damage control started.
Like, a lot of people talking about this movie didn't actually watch it, and I don't blame them at all, honestly. If you didn't watch it and you just wanted to talk about how fucking gross all this shit is, I don't blame you.
Canceling Netflix is not going to fix the bigger problem.
But an Atlanta child advocacy group says the problem goes beyond Cuties, pointing to reality TV shows like Dance Moms and Toddlers and Tiaras as similar forms of exploiting children.
And they're doing swimsuit competitions with little tiny children. It's disgusting.
The fact that Cuties is on Netflix is nothing shy of a crime, in my opinion. It is actual softcore child. I tried to give it the benefit of the doubt. I made that video talking about how maybe Netflix marketing just fucked it up and it's really not a movie that sexualizes kids, but it's significantly worse than I thought it would be, and according to every other YouTuber I've now watched, it is significantly worse than they thought it would be.
So, I know I have a tendency to reference my own work in almost every video I make, but I'm realizing a lot of the stuff I talk about on my channel are way more connected than I thought. In my Amy Schumer video that I personally feel is one of my best, please watch it if you haven't. But in that video, I talk about my complicated relationship with the aforementioned comedian. I talk about how I've never really liked her and how she always irked me for reasons I couldn't quite pin down. I was annoyed at the way she was being marketed as some body positive icon when at the time she was not even plus size and was even offended by the idea of being associated with the term plus size. But because I was born with a feminist bone, I'm pretty sure there was this feeling in my stomach that something wasn't right. One of the somethings was that most of the hate she was getting was coming from men, which, if it involves a woman, is always suspicious. You should always be a little concerned when it's mostly men criticizing women, and I'm being dead serious when I say that. You should be even more concerned if most of the criticisms are just about how fat and ugly she is. I was joking earlier about the feminist bone. No one is born with that. That's not a thing. However, I am a girl's girl. I own that. I am very protective of marginalized people in general, but especially of women. Most of the women who I have defended on my channel are women that I don't even like for real. And that doesn't mean like I hate them, or at least not all of them, just that maybe I didn't pay attention to them much. With Amy, there was always something about her, like I said, but because it isn't hard for me to empathize with a woman or anybody for real, doing research on her did endear me to her a little. And seeing the things that people would say about her online was enough to make me step back and be like, okay, yeah, I don't really like how y'all are talking about this lady. And yes, Amy Schumer, Zionist, racist, white feminism, the person, like, yeah, she sucks, but she's still a woman. And most of her loudest haters at the time, and still now, hated her because she is a woman. Most of the hate that managed to be the loudest was just misogyny and fatphobia. But something people did, something people always do when there's a moral panic or a hate campaign, is find more reasons to defend their hatred. You can see this in the way her anti-fans fixate so much on her alleged joke thievery. Put a pin in that, I have some debunking to do. Oftentimes, children are used to justify some stupid moral panic, which at this point, you should also always be suspicious of to some extent, because we as a society don't actually care about children. We don't care to listen to them or treat them like human beings. It's not as popular to be in favor of it now, but there are still plenty of parents who spank/beat their children. People who are literally smaller than them and weaker than them, like literal bullying behavior that we've just accepted because fuck them kids. And people will defend that shit with their life. Those same people will also be one of the first people to become Mrs. Lovejoy from The Simpsons anytime they need to use children to justify some bullshit they don't want to unpack. It's almost like I'm hinting at something. My point is that there is almost always something that lies underneath these moral panics, hate trains, and internet pile-ons. It's never actually about what the people keeping the train going are claiming it's about. It's always about something else. This is something that I've only recently begun to realize, especially after the Depp v. Heard shit and doing my video on Amy Schumer and Blake and Justin. What sucks is that sometimes the hate is somewhat justified, but people on the internet take things way too far. And sometimes the hate is not justified at all. Sometimes the hate comes from a lack of critical thinking. It comes from not being able to think in a nuanced capacity. Sometimes it comes from certain ideas and beliefs that are rooted in our culture. Things that throughout history we've sometimes asserted have been eradicated. We've evolved from this kind of thinking, so we always think. Yet something will happen, a photo, perhaps, will be posted to the internet. And that photo will cause such an uproar that you realize, oh yeah, no, we haven't evolved from anything, ever. I assume most of you watching are smart, so you probably know that I am talking about the movie Cuties. Just mentioning that is kind of scary because, like with a certain album cover that we're going to discuss later, people have very passionate feelings about it. Intense feelings. And what's interesting but not super surprising is that most of the people who do harbor resentment towards this film have never actually watched it. And to be clear, I don't think you necessarily need to watch something that you feel you're not going to like or is going to upset you. If the contents of the plot turn you off, that's valid. But I do feel you should get the context of something before forming a whole opinion on it. That shouldn't be a radical thing to say. And by context, I don't mean watching someone else's review of it and forming an opinion based on that. Nor do I mean only watching like 30 minutes of a film or out of context clips and only commenting on the shocking parts.
Okay, so someone's dancing sexily in the laundry room, but I think it's an adult, so I hope. Nope! It's a child! Oh, and now she's twerking. Okay, well, oh, now they're all twerking. Okay. Oh my god, every time I look, there's an ass on the screen. Of an 11-year-old. Why the up closes? Like, why? Why did we need to see her ass as she walked up the stairs? Why? No.
Now before I move forward, I will say, unlike many YouTubers who made bank covering this movie, I have actually watched the film, and I would be lying if I said many of the dance scenes didn't make me uncomfortable. And I don't agree with all of the choices that were made by the filmmaker, but you know, that's most movies. I don't think there is a movie that exists that I like that doesn't have something in it that I don't particularly approve of. Knowing about the production of the film and seeing that there was care and consideration for the child actor's mental health and well-being, I think things were handled much better than most sets that involved children, especially in the past. And I feel like someone will probably say, well, yeah, that was the past. This is the now, and this is irresponsible and inappropriate. It's interesting how some of these same people never really get that up in arms when there's like, say, I don't know, a sexual harassment situation on the set of a movie. You know, actors actually being mistreated and their well-being not being taken into account by the filmmakers or the producers. Interesting. I don't want to lump every single person who had legit concerns about the children's safety with the people just jumping on a bandwagon, but this is why it's important to do your research and to get context. Because even if you watch it all the way through and you still don't like how certain scenes were shot, you wouldn't, or at least I hope you wouldn't, just distill the entire movie down to those shocking scenes. Like, you could do that with any movie. You would at least not be, I don't know, confidently declaring that this movie is child porn. The YouTuber Penguin Zero, is that how you say his name? I don't know. I don't care. He's dumb. I usually don't call out YouTubers unless they have a shit ton of subscribers, or at least 100K, and he has 16 million, so I'm gonna say what I want. I'm not saying everyone who disliked Cuties is dumb, I'm just saying he's one of the ones who is. And his 7-minute video about the movie is one of the worst movie reviews I've ever seen. It's part poor media analysis skills and part fear-mongering bullshit. Something that he, along with a lot of other detractors, did was continuously assert that the people who made this film should be thrown under the jail, and anyone who defends it should be put on a watch list.
And I cannot even begin to describe how fucking baffled I am that anyone defends this movie. The fact that this has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes tells me that everyone that left out a positive review needs to be investigated ASAP. Fucking Jeffrey Epstein's ghost has come back from the grave to pay reviewers or something to give this positive reviews. I don't get it. It is unbelievable how anyone will try and defend this movie. Leave it to Twitter to make a political issue. The message that people are walking away from the movie with. Files with the biggest smile on their face, pumping their fists in the air. Thanks, Netflix. Just for easily accessible fucking softcore child porn. It's unbelievable. You can't defend this movie, and if you're defending this movie, you haven't seen it, and if you have seen it and are defending it, you might be a pedophile. It's as simple as that.
It is seriously one of the worst videos I've ever seen in my life. It's so uncharitable and ignorant, but it wasn't like it was just him. People on the left and the right joined hands and hopped on this bandwagon together. I remember at the time I was on Twitter and I kept seeing that epic handshake meme from the movie Predator, like, oh, guess the left and the right are gonna have to shake hands on this one, am I right? Like, are y'all dumb? Again, even if this is genuine concern, why would you ever think that the Republicans have children's best interest in mind, or anyone's best interest in mind other than that of cis straight white men? Why would you not be a little suspicious of the fact that Republicans, who are literally some of the most vile fucking people on the planet and do not give a shit about actual children, are up in arms over this film that they absolutely would have never cared about had that specific poster not been released? Republicans only care about unborn babies. They don't give a fuck about children. Why would you be so ignorant to actually think that the right is on your side? Let alone the fact that the film is centered around a young black girl. Like, I don't know if you've noticed or heard, but Republicans hate black women. Again, are y'all dumb? I say, with love and concern. I'm just concerned is all.
The outrage about Cuties is nonsensical. It's also extremely hypocritical because Cuties presents these uncomfortable images and adds depth to them. But similar kinds of images abound in our culture and nobody says a thing. It is so strange to me that so many people want to get on the "what about the children" train when it comes time to cancel a young black woman filmmaker who's trying to take us beyond the spectacle. She's trying to do something that we don't see anywhere else. But in real life, when real young girls put on actual skimpy outfits to literally perform for adults in gymnastics and cheer and dance on Dance Moms or Bring It On or in those Sia videos, nobody says anything. It's completely uncontroversial. Not only that, but in those actual worlds, the gymnastics world, cheer, dance, pageantry, so many girls have stories of actually being abused. Why is there no federal investigation into that?
Filmmaker Maimouna Doucoure based this film on her own life experiences. She spent a year researching for this movie and interviewed over 700 girls for this movie. Something that no one who critiqued this movie ever mentioned because they probably didn't know because they didn't care to know. They were so stuck in their discomfort that they decided to make their discomfort a national crisis. Just to, shamelessly plug another one of my videos. My body positivity video started off with me recounting the story of plus-size model Tess Holliday appearing on the front of Cosmo in a bathing suit and the subsequent and predictable backlash to that cover. I shared a clip from the podcast Maintenance Phase where in it, co-host Michael Hobbs makes a great point about how people's glorifying obesity claim were just people having a knee-jerk emotional response to seeing a body that they don't approve of. And instead of trying to unpack that to try and understand why they are feeling that way, they decided to make it her problem. They decided to place upon her shoulders the burden of glorifying obesity and proclaim that this cover was somehow going to destroy society as we knew it.
What people are getting mad at, they're mad at having to see a fat person who's not, apologizing to them for the way that they look. But, people's brains don't let them realize what's going on, right? They're like, no, it doesn't bother me that somebody else looks a way that I don't approve of. It's like, no, this is her motivation. This is what she's trying to do. Or like, this is the impact that she's gonna have on the world. And the whole thing is basically just like reaching for any reason for you to justify your really gross emotional response.
Yeah. They tried to hammer home how this was about health. It wasn't about fat shaming. They proposed hypothetical questions like, what if it was an alcoholic on the cover holding a bottle of vodka? What if it was a smoker? Because, being fat and a smoker, pretty indistinguishable. Like with Cuties, they found more reasons to justify their extremely emotional response. You are not a bad person for having an emotional response. You are not responsible for the first thought that comes into your head. When I first saw the Cuties poster, I was also very put off and disturbed, but hearing Black women's opinions on the film, some of the only people on the internet who actually understood what the film was for, I wonder why that is, made me realize that gut feeling I had when I saw the left and right joining hands to participate in this hate campaign online was in fact correct. I feel like even if people watched it and were still deeply uncomfortable, I would like to think we could have had, in a better world, nuanced and complex discussions on what the film was trying to touch on. Because even if there were issues on set, even if some of the choices weren't great, the response from most people online and in the US was disproportionate. It just was. The thing I noticed with these online sensations where something goes viral and there's a huge backlash to it is the way everyone just echoes each other. In my Amy Schumer video, I talked about the really lame jokes men would make about Amy Schumer as a way to dunk on her for not being funny. They insulted her inability to be funny by being even less funny. Like there was one that was like, 2 cannibals were eating Amy Schumer. One of them asked, "Does this taste funny to you?" The other replied saying, "No." You know what else doesn't taste funny? Like that's not funny, but if you go to an Amy Schumer video, maybe go to one from the 2010s, and you will probably see that joke at least a few times in the comment section. What is funny though is how her anti-fans would steal shitty Amy Schumer jokes while accusing Amy Schumer of being a joke thief. Oh, the irony. You will see people repeat and parrot these lame-ass hyperbolic jokes that are just so over the top. The amount of people who kept putting in that FBI open up meme in their videos, like, embarrassing. And I'm prone to hyperbole. I love being hyperbolic, but it's not funny when it's coming from a place of pure ignorance. Under Penguin's Cuties video, the first several comments are a great example of this. Your Honor, my client may have committed murder, but he did it as a critique of how bad murder is. Your Honor, I only burned those orphanages down to illustrate how awful child murder is. Fighting fire with fire doesn't work when the other guy has a fire fetish. What? The only acceptable way for this movie to exist is after the first 5 minutes, the camera pans around to Chris Hansen with his iconic, "Why don't you have a seat over there?" Followed by everyone defending the movie being put on a list. Oh yes, Chris Hansen, great guy. You don't need to commit murder to say don't murder. You don't have to sexualize children to say don't sexualize children. This insistence on comparing it to murder constantly and also labeling it child porn. Anna Marie Forcino, one of the few people at the time who did watch the movie also called it that. But it's not.
Did it today. A huge part of me feels really dumb because I gave the director the benefit of the doubt because I didn't want to believe that the film was going to be as exploitative as it was, but spoiler alert, it was. However, with that being said, let's get into why Cuties was so unsettling to watch and how Netflix is basically selling child.
Yes, the scenes of the kids are of them twerking and gyrating and it is uncomfortable, but it's also cringy. And last I checked, twerking is not pornographic. If that's the case, then those how to twerk YouTube videos need to be flagged. We never actually see these children naked. We don't see them having sex or anything. Saying definitively that it is CSAM is very disingenuous and needlessly alarmist. These alarmist talking points spread like wildfire, and so many people regurgitated the same points that it became the general consensus around the movie. People would just make throwaway pedo jokes about Cuties because it had become so associated online with CP that the actual plot and message of the movie was completely lost. And anyone who wanted to offer a more nuanced view of the film was met with so much hostility.
Not just Ami's mother, but herself and her great aunt. It is so well done, so moving. But we can't even get to that because y'all want to jump headfirst into puritanical sex panic. And oh my God at the people saying, you're sexualizing children. I'm not sexualizing children. Are you sexualizing children? Because I realize these kids are doing a job. They are on set telling a story, which means there are adults present, their parents, teachers, and they're not being reduced to these girls just doing these sexy dances. We get to the root of it, their motivations, their incentives. This film does something that most of us in our real lives do not do, which is take children's stories seriously. It actually listens to kids, and that is so compelling and so important. You know, I have some feelings about children working, but that's neither here nor there. Children act. We've come to accept it. And I have seen children actors do all kinds of things. Pretend like they're on drugs, pretend like they're hooking up, pretend like they're harming themselves, being abusive, being abused, being violent. What makes this so different? Like when I was a kid, I really liked this movie called 13, which starred actual teenagers. And 13 was about 8th graders wilding out, doing the craziest stuff. That movie was nominated for Oscars. And now everybody loves Euphoria, right? Okay, Euphoria is legal adults pretending like they're minors, hooking up, doing drugs, being abused. So what is the problem?
Even Khadijah and Bo, when they made a video rehashing the controversy a few years ago, still got so many negative comments from people who are still mad about Cuties, as per the title of their video. In their amazing podcast, Rehash, YouTuber Brody Deschanel and her friend Hannah Rain discussed the film a couple of years ago, and they mentioned how this film was one of the biggest indicators that purity culture had crept its way back into the mainstream.
That's a great way to put it. So I've been thinking a lot about like what the shift is here, right? Because like when I was doing this episode, I was like, oh fuck. The real shift was probably the Jeffrey Epstein stuff and the Wayfair stuff and the Pizzagate. But I do think that this shift happened within the realm of art. Like I think it made people think a bit more, and I know because it's a moral panic, it just dropped off the face of the earth, and we don't really think about Cuties anymore because it's been basically ejected off the internet. But I'm wondering what the shift is here, because I do think there was a shift. It's like one of the first things I thought of when we were planning this season.
Yeah, you've wanted to talk about this film for a while.
Yeah, and I feel like, I don't know, what do you see the shift being?
Well, I think for one, it's still up on Netflix, right?
Yes.
I think that that's very interesting. I think it's like, I mean, fuck the streamers and like everything, especially right now. But I think the fact that it's remained on the platform and like they've stood their ground at least in keeping it up there is comforting.
Yeah, it was weird to see people like Netflix who care all about money kind of defending something on the basis of art. Like, it was actually really nice to see that happening. Connor has this really devastating quote. She says, "Although some detractors have good intentions, I'm not convinced that everyone who is professing disgust about this gentle film is motivated by morality or reason. A few days before my father died, I learned he had a website. Since 1999, he had mostly used it to promote UFO conspiracy theories, but eventually it became a place for him to rant about the supposed spread of liberal perversion in America. The last entry before his death was in part dedicated to me, whom he called childless, barren, and alone. I imagine he would have detested Cuties and the empathy it showed for its young characters." But it's true, like, I just feel like the people who were loudest about this and wanted to silence the film and wanted to send death threats to Maimouna Doucoure care actually much less than she does about children and whether or not they're okay, you know?
And even just in terms of the actors that they claim to be concerned over, it's like you're the ones that are propelling this narrative that the children are being sexualized and exploited and like causing people to look at the children in that light, right? Whereas she is actually taking steps to minimize the harm of that.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's like you're okay to like take these kids and throw them to the wolves and then also just like accuse them of being in child pornography because you don't actually care about the welfare of them. Yeah.
So, as a young Black girl who did not grow up in the same environment or country, but did grow up in a religious family with a very prudish parent who did not even bother to even broach the topic of sex, I related to a lot of the things that happened in this movie. I remember being 10, 11 years old and being taught by girls who were slightly older than me how to pop, which is just twerking before that was a term. I mean, I'm not going to rehash my entire childhood, but this movie is touching on a very real experience that a lot of women share. especially women of color who are more likely to be adultified. I remember growing up, my mom did not like sex scenes or kissing scenes. Like, even to this day, she hates that shit. It grosses her out. So when I was little and we were watching a movie and something sexual would happen, she would legit cover my eyes or just fast forward. And all this did was make me more curious about what it was she was shielding from me. And shielding your children from discussions about sex is what intensifies a lot of kids' fixation on sex, and this could lead to children consuming porn privately so they can see what it is that their parents won't talk to them about. I remember the first time I saw a penis on a porn website, I was like, oh my god, what is that? Is that what they look like?
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god, what is that? I'm scared. I'm scared. I don't understand it.
Being a Gen Z means I grew up with the internet. I do not remember a time when the internet didn't exist, which is kind of one of the fundamental differences between millennials and Gen Z. Part of growing up with the internet means a lot of us were exposed to shit that we did not have the brain capacity to fully understand what we were looking at. Many of us grew up kind of fast, partly because of the internet and having access to a world that many of our parents didn't understand. And Cuties does a great job of portraying that reality. In a Salon article by Bernadette Barton titled Porn and Purity and Cuties are two sides of the patriarchal coin, she writes. The film chronicles a few weeks in the life of Ami, an 11-year-old Senegalese immigrant living in Paris. Ami straddles two cultures in the story: a polygamous conservative branch of Islam that advocates purity and submission in girls and women, and the secular culture of pornification and social media. Here, director Maimouna Doucoure beautifully captures the mercurial, cruel, and confusing terrain of 11-year-old girl groups. Determined to show her mettle, Ami teaches herself how to dance by mimicking the sexuality adult women display in provocative music videos, and then piques the girls' interest by teaching them to twerk and pout. One of the more effective ways to raise awareness about a problematic culture norm like pornification is to baldly show it. And this is the tactic Doucoure takes in many cringe-inducing scenes of Ami and the girls practicing for and performing a dance competition. They wore booty shorts and crop tops, twerk, finger their lips, and mimic provocative dance moves popularized in videos like the recently released single by Cardi B. This is the material that critics of Cuties denounce, many of whom reviled the film without actually having watched it. It is, after all, an easy sell. Few want to find themselves on the side of arguing for the sexualization of girls. Going back to the CSAM CP declarations of the movie, something that really irked the absolute shit out of me during the height of this controversy was people continuously asserting that this movie was just going to titillate pedophiles or that it was pedo baiting. I remember a family member at the time who didn't watch the movie either, but had very passionate feelings about the movie, also shared this ridiculous opinion, and I think that is an incredibly immature and ignorant thing to say. I think it's repulsive, actually. I think if you are one of those people who are making that argument, I'd like to hope that some of you changed your mind, because you should be embarrassed by that. That is classic rape culture victim blaming, and it's disgusting. You are essentially peddling the "what was she wearing" argument that is meant to place the blame on anything else but the actual predator themselves. Sexual predators who prey on children don't need a movie like Cuties to sexualize children. They already do that. If, say, someone did assault one of the young actresses after seeing this film, what would you say? Would you say, well, you were twerking and dressing provocatively in that movie, so what did you expect? Is that what you would say? I really hope not. I think wanting to desperately call this movie CP is predictable in a pornified culture that has such binary thinking when it comes to almost anything, but especially sex. It's challenging to discuss this with people across the political spectrum. Conservatives like Ted Cruz and a Texas grand jury indicting Netflix for lewd depictions in Cuties sometimes misread illustrations of pornification as an endorsement of it, which is why some are calling to boycott the film. On the other hand, political progressives tend to misconstrue critiques of raunch culture as advocating sexual censorship, and they resist considering the ways in which it narrowly channels female sexual expression into one and only one version: to be sexy like a porn star. To me, Cuties put a mirror on society in more ways than not. From what the film was actually trying to get across and the backlash of the film, it really exposed how much people either don't really know what it's like to grow up as a preteen girl, or don't want to know, or have become so desensitized to the ways little girls are hypersexualized already, and couldn't handle a film wanting to bravely address that.
That's true. That is true. I think it just makes me really sad that this is gonna
like impact Doucoure's career because we don't really get to see these stories about little Muslim girls that often.
No.
Especially ones that don't, like, you know, languish in hardship. Like, she's not abjectly suffering in this, right? Like, she's a little girl and it gives her a lot of humanity.
And it does, like, I think it does a really good job at capturing being that age, which is a very complicated time.
It is.
For, like, every girl. Because you are suddenly thinking about, you're becoming more exposed to, like, sexualized imagery, and you're trying to figure out what are the boundaries for you to express that or experiment that. What are you comfortable with, and what do you just want to project into the world? And then every girl sort of at a different stage with that relationship. I feel like at that age, like, I knew girls that felt like way more mature. I knew girls that like weren't doing
anything.
And it's interesting.
I didn't have my first kiss till like, middle of high school, and like a lot of girls in middle school were already like making out with boys, and there's nothing wrong with either of those things.
I knew girls who had sex in middle school. Like,
that is really crazy, actually.
But like,
dance. If you were to watch the tapes from my dance recitals, like the girls were doing crazy things. Some of the girls did like a chair routine for one of the recitals, and it was like, that's crazy. These girls are 13.
Toddlers in Tiaras. There was once a girl dressed as Julia Roberts in Pretty Women on Toddlers in Tiaras, and they aired that on television.
Yeah, it's a really perverse culture we live in, and I just feel like really contradictory and confusing. I think our culture has trouble reconciling with this weird tension between the way our culture sexualizes young people and then the fact that young people are capable of sexual feelings. And Connor kind of speaks to this in her article. She says, Cuties is a reminder of the dangers of the digitally connected world, but also of the fact that sexual feelings aren't always contained within bodies old enough to understand them. And I just think the film is trying to get at that.
Even if you don't agree with the choices that were made, and even if you watched it and couldn't watch it again, as Maya and Hannah said, I think it was really brave for this filmmaker to want to tackle this, because we do not get stories like this. Growing up as a young girl is not all roses and sunshine. The friendship between the girls in the film was so relatable that it was scary. Like, that mean girl bullying that happens in girl groups is very realistic, especially the ways young girls can be influenced by other girls who are trying to, as Black people say, act grown. And in a puritanical society, being sexual is what makes you grown. Why do you think so many Disney girlies like Miley Cyrus went on to exude a hypersexualized persona? They want to show the world, hey, look, I'm not a little girl anymore. You see this in the way we talk about virginity, which isn't a real thing, but for the sake of this argument, let's pretend it is. Think of the movie Grease, where Sandy is this chaste, pure, wholesome good girl who dresses very modestly, and even though she never outright says she's never had sex, the presumption is that she hasn't. She is a good girl. She's not out here wearing red lipstick and tight clothes like the Pink Ladies. Because of that, Sandy is infantilized and is treated like a naive baby by Rizzo and the other girls. Like that famous scene at the slumber party where they get her to like take a swig of some wine and smoke a cigarette. They're being grown, and because Sandy doesn't really do any of those things and is lousy with her virginity, she is seen as someone who still has yet to grow up. The actors in Grease may not look like real teenagers, but the older I get, the more I realize how apt and spot on this depiction between the girls is. Any of us can relate to being peer pressured by our friends so that we can look cool. This is what happens in Cuties. She begins filming herself doing provocative dances so she can post them to social media with the hope that these girls will want to be friends with her. When you're a kid, acting like a kid is lame, and kids who act like kids get made fun of. No one wants that. They want to be in the big girl club. So in order for Sandy to impress her friends and fuck ass Danny Zuko, she becomes a bad girl, which in a rape culture just means wearing tight clothes, high heels, and red lipstick. In a purity culture, there's no in-between. Either you're a modest prude or you're a provocative slut. You don't even need to have any actual sexual encounters with anyone to be put in the slut camp. You can go from covering up to showing just a little bit of skin, and instantly people project so many thoughts and ideas onto you. It's a very thin line that you can so easily cross and not even realize it. I remember some years back going to some family thing, probably a barbecue or something, where I made the mistake of wearing a dress that was kind of short. At the time, this was like the first time I actually wore something that short. And when I tell you that so many of my male family members would not stop commenting on it, like, it was creepy. Because I don't really date and because I dressed a certain way, I think my family thought of me as like a Sandy Olsen. And then I put on this dress and it's like, oh, okay, like, the fuck? I remember when I was actually a child, like 10 or 12, at a family member's house, sitting on this bench swing thing. I had on like this short skirt and I had my legs open because I wasn't aware that that was unladylike. Unladylike unless you're giving birth to a child or having sex missionary style, I guess. Anyway, my ex-step uncle came up to me and was like, I don't remember his exact words, but he was basically saying that girls who sit like that get called sluts. He said that to a child. There's an article from Time about Cuties and the controversy where the author explains what Maimouna Doucoure was trying to do with this film. Doucoure explains that she is telling this story through Ami's eyes, challenging the audience by showing the hypersexualization of children has become normalized. Cuties explores how girls become women sometimes sooner than they should, forced into adulthood by the society they live in and the media they consume. When I was young, I also saw a lot of injustices around me lived by women, says Doucoure. We're used to saying that women in other countries are oppressed, but the question that I had when making the film was, isn't the objectification of a woman's body that we often see in Western culture another kind of oppression? So, before we talk about what you all came for, I think the big question of this video will be, why? Why can't we have a movie where we're trying to tackle an actual problem that is normalized in our society? Why were people so horrified by the movie that they couldn't even try to engage with it at all? I feel like Me Too did do some good in the sense that we started to have more meaningful conversations around consent. To me, I noticed this when there was so much discourse around teacher-student relationships and teen media and how weird it was that we spent decades romanticizing a predatory relationship dynamic like that. This, I feel, is partially why on some level people finally decided to admit and understand that what R. Kelly did to Aaliyah and those other girls was rape. This led to more discourse on age gap relationships in general. This discourse started off pretty reasonable, but as usual, the internet takes things too far. As soon as everyone learned the word groomer, any person who was in a relationship with a younger person was being deemed a predator or a groomer. Like Leonardo DiCaprio consistently dating super young women was somehow the same as what R. Kelly did. Another way these discussions went off the rails was the conversation around the depiction of sex and nudity in movies. Because of the long history of actresses being pressured into getting nude for a film, or how back in the day we didn't have intimacy coordinators, and so often male directors would just kind of do shit on a whim during the filming of a sex scene that potentially put actors in awkward and uncomfortable situations. How underage actors like Dominique Swain in the horrible 90s Lolita were hypersexualized and had to make out with adult actors like Jeremy Irons, or underage Alicia Silverstone being half naked in The Crush. This led to a place where we feel like, actually, let's just not have sex in movies anymore. Let's just get rid of nudity altogether because the shit is just too messy. I don't solely blame Me Too for this necessarily, like that was not the intended goal, but I think it sort of spiraled into everyone kind of turning into a prude. And again, that was not the goal of Me Too. I don't blame Me Too for that. I just think that, plus the downfall of sex positivity, was part of why now any depiction of sex in a movie or any movie that even wants to talk about sex is deemed as porn, or a movie that is showing children dancing provocatively means that it's CSA now. Nope, not interested in any complexity. That's porn, and if you watch that, you should be put on a watch list.
It's hard to define. Like, I think there is no right or wrong answer, but it is difficult to define because it's not something that really has been properly defined.
Yeah, I guess it's like a sensation and like not sensation, but like a phenomena, thank you, that occurs in a culture about the status or the state of that culture's morality and like falsely projects those fears onto art or like news stories or people as like portraying, I don't know, like folk devils.
Yeah, that's a perfect definition, I think. That was really good.
Thank you.
There are these sociologists, Eric Good and Nachman Ben Yehuda, who do define moral panics, and they define them as instances when substantial numbers of the members of societies are subject to intense feelings of concern about a given threat, which a sober assessment of the evidence suggests is either non-existent or considerably less than would be expected from the concrete harm posed by that threat. Such overheated periods of intense concern are typically short-lived. In such periods, which sociologists refer to as moral panics, the agents responsible for the threat, or folk devils, as you said, Hannah, are stereotyped and classified as deviants. And they say there's like a few things that make a moral panic. Like, it kind of has to hit these markers. There has to be like a heightened level of concern expressed by the panickers. There has to be an increased level of hostility towards the people who provoked the panic. There has to be a bit of consensus among the group panicking that the threat is real and serious, like they believe it's real. The response has to be disproportionate to the actual event that happened, or is thought to be happening, and it has to be kind of volatile. Like the panic will erupt just as quickly as it dies out.
There's this YouTuber named OneCloud9 who makes misogyny slap, but who I'm gonna give some grace because he is a baby. He is literally the same age as my nephew and reminds me of him, and my hope is one day he will see the light. But I'm bringing him up because he made a video talking about Challengers, a sexy movie that came out last year that doesn't even really have a ton of sex in it, but due to the fact that there is sexual tension in the movie and a threesome, he compared the movie to Bang Bros.
We all eat shit like this. I guarantee this is a bunch of people's dream movies, bro. Like, I guarantee all the little city girls are going to the theaters in packs finna watch this shit. Like, the goddamn movie's supposed to be about tennis and a threesome. And then it's supposed to turn into like a love triangle based off of this threesome. Like, bro, who thought of this movie, bro? Bang Bros? And again, I gotta keep on saying this. I haven't actually watched the movie yet, so I could be wrong. But from what the trailer gave off, this is exactly the plot of the movie. And I'm not trying to diss any of the actors who put their hard-earned time and effort into any of the roles they played, but it is what it is. From our perspective right now, this movie looks like it's gonna be over-sexualized to the extreme. And I feel like that's a big problem in our society, because the line from films and adult films is getting closer and closer each and every year.
What? How can you watch this and think of that? Zendaya doesn't even get naked in the movie. There aren't any sex scenes, but because it was hot, somehow it's perfect now. We saw this with Poor Things as well. Even though the nudity in that film was normal and not exploitative, and the woman who got naked helped produce the film because there was nudity and sex scenes, it's poor now. The poor clutching that is becoming so pervasive among especially younger people is so frustrating to watch, but it was inevitable. Because it's not like we haven't been here before.
When I watched this movie, this was the first time in my entire 29 years on this earth that I have watched a film that I was like, I see myself 100% in this character. I have never watched a film and been able to do that. I've seen parts of myself, sure, but I've never watched a movie and been able to really be like, oh, I get this. Remember so many little details of that. Even getting to watch a movie where, yeah, I had the subtitles on because I don't speak French, but I could understand the Wolof, and being able to see something like that in a mainstream sort of way, it just really meant a lot to me. It did a lot for me. So to see people berating this film and berating this woman who was speaking about an experience that was so true to her, it was really heartbreaking, honestly. And pissed me off. I'm not gonna lie, it actually did, because instead of actually examining what kind of world do we live in where Maimouna Doucoure would make a film like this and it actually ring true to a lot more people than y'all think it did, instead of examining that, it was so much easier to just yell at her, yell at Netflix, and call them all predators and be like, no one should watch the film, when it actually was a really important film to watch.
It's so funny to me that people want to clutch their pearls now when we are coming off of that WAP craze where everybody was doing the WAP dance, getting on the ground, talking about their WAPs on Instagram, on TikTok. Now, do y'all really think that it was only people over 18 who were reposting and recreating that dance and singing about their WAPs? Come on now. I know that's not true because I actually had the misfortune of coming across a minor doing the dance, and I just like, oh, that's a kid. Now, if you're grown, again, do whatever you want to do. You find it empowering, fine, whatever. But let's be honest. So let me ask you, every time you see a minor doing those dances, which frankly look a lot like the dances in Cuties, did you report it? Did you flag it? Did you sign a petition? Did you reach out to your senator? Or did you just scroll past and say, oh, that was awkward. Let me be better about making sure I never have to see that again. Okay. We're all complicit.
The terror within that we are part of the problem, that we are complicit until it doesn't serve us, that we're the ones who create a world where young girls feel like they need to be more sexually voracious or act like adult women, even at the tender age of 11, as the film depicts. The terror within that we are just as responsible for Cuties as the director was.
Okay, let's talk about Sabrina.
With Madonna as her model, Britney Spears has upset a lot of mothers in this country, starting with the wife of the governor of Maryland, who appeared at an anti-violence rally, and well, listen to what she said.
Really, if I had an opportunity to shoot Britney Spears, I think I would.
Oh, that's horrible. That's really bad.
Because of the example for kids and how hard it is to be a parent and keep all of this away from your kids.
Well, that's really sad that she said that. Ew. You know what? Like, I'm not here to, babysit her kids.
What do Sabrina Carpenter and Sydney Sweeney have in common? Well, they're both blonde, both white, conventionally attractive. They're both Zoomers, like me. Both started off small before taking on a more sexualized image that included what the kids call a glow-up. Both have been labeled as representing a certain gaze, and both have received criticism for setting back women's rights by daring to be too sexy and capitalizing off their sex appeal in some way, shape, or subform. Now, I only recently started paying attention to Sabrina. I don't know why it took me so long because I love pop music, especially disco, and Espresso is a perfect mixture of 80s pop and 70s disco, and it's exactly my shit. It's the same reason I love Say So by Doja Cat, and Espresso has some 80s vibes to it as well. Like a lot of Sabrina's music, including Please 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 and Manchild. They're just really good songs. And no, I don't mean that they're just fun, I mean that they are well-made songs with good, funny, cheeky lyrics. And I think Sabrina Carpenter is talented, and I think her team is very smart. Her music clearly speaks to a lot of people, especially women, for a reason. But like with anything that has a strong female fan base, people cannot wait to try and diminish its value as soon as they possibly can. First of all, if you genuinely think all of her songs sound the same, even though I deeply disagree, and I think that accusation gets thrown at a lot of pop stars' music, but even if you truly feel that way, that is fine. But because pop is one of the most mainstream genres and it is one of the biggest ways to gain attention, there are people who have a disdain toward the genre. If something appeals to the mainstream, especially to a lot of women and girls who are responsible for making a lot of things popular, some people will dismiss it for not being creative and only existing as a cheap way for people to make a lot of money. This is part of why some Black people had a problem with Whitney Houston and Lizzo. They felt they were trying to appeal to the mainstream so that they could be accepted by the white. But this is exactly what happened to the backlash against disco music in the 1970s, which led to the infamous Disco Demolition Night orchestrated by this fucking loser, let's be real, named Steve Dahl, where according to Wikipedia and the You Wrong About podcast, a crate full of disco records was blown up on a baseball field, and a bunch of people swarmed the fields, and a riot broke out over disco. No one died or anything except for disco, I guess. The You Wrong About podcast covered this a few years back in a really great and informative episode about the history of disco and its roots in Black and queer spaces. Gee, I wonder if that has something to do with the backlash. The Grammys had an entire category dedicated to disco, and Gloria Gaynor, who sang the iconic I Will Survive, is the only person to ever win an award in that category. Before it, along with disco, was killed off, and other pop genres sort of took its place. Even if disco gets much more appreciation and respect now, especially from younger generations, both genres have been hated for very similar reasons. And this is what propels a lot of, I feel, somewhat unfair criticism against a lot of pop stars like Taylor Swift, another white, blonde, conventionally attractive girly. A lot of these pop stars will get even more shit because people feel they didn't fully earn their place. We know that Hollywood is extremely racist and shallow and will seize upon the most conventionally attractive white person if they find one. I don't feel that way with Sabrina personally, and Sabrina could be having her 15 minutes of fame now, but just because she's a hot white blonde girlie doesn't mean she doesn't deserve the attention she has received, nor does it mean she isn't talented. That doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about the racial aspects of a lot of white pop stars like Ariana Grande and Miley Cyrus using blackness as a costume that they've since retired. We saw this with Miley Cyrus post-Disney, suddenly starring in rap videos, and Christina Aguilera, for fuck's sake. And yes, is that annoying that black women at the time got called ghetto and ratchet for twerking, but a white girl does a white girl version of it and it becomes a trend? Yes. Yes, it is. The YouTuber Fat Charlie made a video about Sabrina Carpenter before all of this album cover drama, and he talked about this as well, especially in regards to Miley and Ariana.
And this color spectrum of protection is not just about what's being expressed, it's about who gets to express it without being punished. The consequences of this is that instead of being allowed to safely experiment, they're labeled threats to decency, branded as poor role models, or just become hypersexual caricatures. Which leads me to a question. How do these crafted images impact how society learns about and attributes values of good and bad when it comes to sexuality? And I need you to understand that this is about establishing a discourse, not about condemning those for opting into showing a little skin. My frustration comes from the response of the public and the media and how these depictions are spoken about and showcased. Do you think Megan Thee Stallion could get a Fortnite skin? Hell no, white dudes would set their consoles on fire in protest. Plus the pearl clutchers would lose their damn minds, but Sabrina Carpenter got one. And in regards to the context surrounding Sabrina Carpenter, it's impossible not to account for the media machine that's driven her to stardom.
And I don't disagree with most of what they're saying in this video. I think you should all go and watch it. There is something to be said about white women like Sabrina Carpenter, Kim Kardashian, Ariana Grande being able to just try on black woman aesthetics and vernacular as some sort of phase before going back to their white roots. After Nonsense came out, Sabrina appeared on Jimmy Kimmel, and oh my god, if you know anything about Aaliyah, you would have been like, yep, that's a whole Aaliyah-inspired performance. From the outfit to the dancing, like, very Aaliyah, and the song itself is very R&B pop. But when Short and Sweet came out, she took on a sexier, girlier persona, it seems. Less baggy pants and more skirts and dresses and bodysuits, which is fine. But it is notable, and there is a time and a place for that conversation. That's not at the heart of this conversation as much as some people are trying to claim it is, but that should not be completely disregarded, you know? There's also the fact that she made a very cringy and not okay BBC joke in a rendition of Nonsense.
BBC said I should keep it PG. BBC, I wish I had it in me. There's a double meaning if you dig deep.
Sabrina girl, why?
Sabrina girl Carpenter.
That's gross. And her being a teeny tiny little white woman, the exact type of woman that you usually see in most interracial porn, yeah, it's not a good look. Even if you do like BBC girl, don't do that, please. This is one of those things where we could be having a conversation about the ways some white women hypersexualize black men, or how a lot of pop stars who are trying to make it big use blackness to signal to people that they're a big kid now. But as usual, these valid critiques get swept aside and the invalid critiques get the most attention. So everyone is mad at my girl Sabrina because early in the month of June, soon after her recently released hit single Man-Child came out, she released the photos to her album cover on her Instagram. One of her in a black dress and heels on her knees with the man standing mostly out of frame with Sabrina's hair bunched up in his hand. And the other of a dog with blondish hair wearing a dog collar with man's best friend inscribed on it. Sabrina is looking directly at the camera. She looks happy and horny to me, but everyone saw something differently, I guess. For this section, we're going to break down the top 4 grievances that people have against Sabrina Carpenter in this album cover. Grievance number 1. To be satire or not to be satire? That is the question. It honestly really infuriates me how there are so many people on TikTok dismissing valid criticisms about the cover as lacking media literacy. Like, we know that she's trying to be satirical and shocking. We aren't stupid. The problem is that the execution misses the mark. Honestly tired of hearing about how all of her actions are somehow ironic and satirical. So, this take stuck out to me because satire is famously kind of complicated to execute effectively, and it's hard for a lot of people to understand. I actually think more people misunderstand satire more than we'd like to admit. I was watching this Mickey Atkins video, I can't remember which one, but she said something along the lines of like, if people miss the satirical nature of something, then it fails as satire. Now, just as an aside, I love Mickey Atkins. I love the work she does on that channel, but I just slightly disagree. I think there is some truth to that, but I also think a lot of people are bad at noticing satire. I am too. I am people. I was talking about this with Dokie, and she told me that, neurodivergent people can oftentimes miss satire, and that makes sense. I've never been officially diagnosed, but I'm most definitely neurodivergent, and I will take things literally sometimes, which is weird because I'm very sarcastic. But even I fail at noticing when satire is happening. Satire can be difficult to understand because satire can take on many forms, and too many people expect satire to explain the satire to them, if that makes sense. Like, it's easy to spot a lot of the satire in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, for example, because while I love Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, many of their songs are just explaining the joke they're making to you. Let's Generalize About Men is a great example. Let's take one bad thing about one man and apply it to all of them. Or, there are no exceptions, all 3 billion men are like this. And this is a huge part of millennial humor, breaking the fourth wall and just plainly stating the thing you're satirizing in a way that most people could understand because it's telling you what you're meant to take away from the song. It doesn't leave that much room for interpretation.
I cannot slap you back because you are a lady.
That clearly is a double standard.
The most common form of satire is Horatian satire, which is meant to condemn a certain type of person or thing. There's also parody, which is similar but different in the sense that it's meant to just mock something rather than condemn something and make some sort of commentary on it. Think Vampires Suck versus like Blazing Saddles, or Dr. Strangelove and the Stepford Wives versus Scary Movie and the other scary movies. It doesn't have to be comedic, like there's what's called Juvenalian satire, I think I'm saying that right. That tends to be darker and more dystopian, like A Clockwork Orange or Get Out. At least that's my general understanding of the main differences between satire and parody. I personally really love satire and absurdist humor because it's typically a very dark or dark comedic kind of humor that's commenting on something that is true and relatable. That's why when people were explaining the meaning behind both the photos, the one of her on the floor and the other of the dog, I was like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense, and I had more appreciation for it.
I remember them saying to us that most people are consumers. They just consume whatever they're told, given, or shown uncritically, and they take it all at face value. Most people read an article or look at something and think they know everything they need to know to form an opinion without any further inquiry because they assume they have the full picture. And that, my friends, is probably the single most important lesson I ever took from any of those lectures. And it hasn't only stayed with me all these years, it's rung truer and truer as I go through life, because every day it becomes clearer and clearer to me that motherfuckers really do not think critically about shit, and everyone is worse off for it. A current example of this is the immediate outrage Sabrina Carpenter's cover for her new single Man Child is receiving from people who didn't think an inch past woman on the ground holding man's leg there could be no deeper explanation than selling subservience to men.
This is being made into something way bigger than it needs to be. Sabrina wrote a song about how difficult it is to find a grown man who acts like one, and announces an album called Man's Best Friend. The art is obviously a play on women being bitches, as is the name Man's Best Friend. And it's also a visualization of a woman in a subservient role, which is often the situation women find themselves unwillingly in. It's satire, and not even the most provocative or evocative form that we've seen in the last 50 years.
I plan to be meaner in this section because I was so infuriated by the horrible comments I was seeing people make about Sabrina in this cover, but I'm going to try to be nice here. We all like to think that we are so incredibly smart, and I'm sure many of you are. I am also very smart, but that doesn't mean that I know everything and that things will never go over my head. They absolutely do. I even miss misogyny when it's happening sometimes, even though I've been reading about feminism for years. The Stepford Wives is a great example of the ways feminists or left-leaning people can miss the satire in something that is very transparently condemning something. Feminists at the time didn't like the Stepford Wives because they felt the ending was too bleak. They felt that it was endorsing the vision of the Men's Association, which was wanting to turn women into obedient robots with big titties, when it was actually a pretty scathing commentary on patriarchy. So this is from an Entertainment Weekly article that came out in 2017 that talks about the backlash against the film at the time. The Stepford Wives did not find great critical or box office success, and initially many second-wave feminists derided it as exploitative trash. A 1975 New York Times article described how Columbia Pictures invited feminist activists to a Stepford screening, only for them to meet the film with hisses, groans, and guffaws. Betty Friedan called it a ripoff of the women's movement, and then stomped out of the screening room. She was very upset about our movie, Tina Louise says. Very upset. She thought Ira Levin was saying that's the way things should be, but he didn't feel that way at all. Neither did Forbes or the rest of the cast. Brian always used to say, if anything, it's anti-men, Newman recalls. If the men are really stupid enough to want wives like that, then it's sad for them. I thought the men were ridiculous to want to make women into servile creatures. Oh, Newman, you're so naive. Like the Stepford Wives, both the book and the 70s adaptation has aged like fine wine. It's a suspenseful thriller / horror movie / satirical comedy exposing the lengths cis-het conservative men would go to in order to strip women of their personhood and bodily autonomy. Of course, the movie ends on a bleak note. Misogyny is bleak. It's horrible. That's why it ends that way. I say all this to say that satire can go over many people's heads, even when the satire slaps hard as hell. So, I'm sorry, but the ones getting mad at people for who they feel are making them out to be idiots because they don't get the satire, you just might not get it, babes. And I understand. I think this is also why a lot of people miss the satire in Tropic Thunder. People can have sensitive reactions to certain types of imagery, and it can cloud your judgment. Going back to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in the song Don't Be a Lawyer, which is about one of the side characters discouraging a different character, I don't remember his name, from wanting to pursue a career in law. And he sings about how lawyers are deeply unhappy and that it's a miserable field to be in. According to him. I have no idea. The music video ends with a man meant to portray the lawyers at the CW, and he's like, we here at the CW network don't endorse this message. And then he's just like, fuck it, and then jumps out the window.
See? Don't be a lawyer!
That's funny. Not because suicide is funny, but because, in my opinion, it works as a good punchline to the entire message of the song, which is that lawyers are depressed. There's another suicide joke in the Math of Love Triangles, where Rebecca says, will this help me choose? If not, I'll be swinging from a hypotenuse. Like, a noose. I love jokes that are jokingly and hyperbolically stating things that are at least half true to a lot of people. When you're suicidal, at least for me, every little thing that goes wrong feels like the end of the world. Like, I'm not stupid. I know that that is an unhealthy way to think. I also know that joke is fucked up, but that is just the truth of my reality when I am really depressed, and so those jokes just resonate with me. And I can understand how someone could take those jokes literally or be disturbed by them, which is why I try not to make those kinds of jokes on my channel. In summation, the detractors seem to think that no one will get the satire inherent in the images, and that's clearly not true. Many people understood what she was possibly trying to convey. I just don't like this idea that because some people miss the satire, that means it completely fails as satire. Because it didn't fail for a lot of people. You don't have to like it, but that doesn't mean that it isn't art. And I really fucking hate that y'all basically bullied her into changing her album cover. Like, that really upsets me, but I'm gonna reserve that anger, because these are just gonna get worse. Let's move on to the next grievance, shall we?
Sabrina Carpenter announced that she's coming out with an album called Man's Best Friend, and the cover photo is her on her knees, bent down, mouth slightly open, while a man who's not fully pictured pulls on her hair like this. And what are the modern mainstream feminists doing? Iconic, queen, mother, applauding, so excited, repost on the story. But last week when Sydney Sweeney was talking about how she's selling her bathwater and working with this company, and she was posted up in a bathtub for this ad, it was a problem. She was setting women backwards. Okay, you need to pick a lane. You either need to be completely coherent with your feminist worldview, where you believe that all women should have complete autonomy over their bodies and should be allowed to do what they want with their bodies so long as it's consensual. You need to be logically consistent with the fact that you believe sexual liberation is an amazing form of empowerment to free women from the patriarchy, because you believe that in the past, men have used that to oppress women, to keep them bound, so and so on. You either fully align yourself with that idea and that worldview, or you don't. And I'm not one to completely disregard any kind of nuances, but when it comes to a thing like this, I cannot see how there is a balance and how there is a middle ground. And sure, some modern feminists could argue that yes, women are allowed to do whatever they want with their body, but certain ideas and certain choices feed into the patriarchy, as opposed to, abolish it, overcome it, But where's your scale? Where's the line? How do you police that? How do you set the standard for what is empowerment and what is sexual liberation and what is just feeding the patriarchy? Clearly there isn't one. Clearly there isn't one, because Sabrina Carpenter is always posted up half naked on her album covers, writing songs constantly about how she pleases men. She does different positions at every single concert that she does, and she's celebrated as an icon. She's doing Lolita-inspired photo shoots, and everybody loves her, and she's the queen of pop. But when a very famous, well-known actress uses her sexual attention that she harbors from the mass media for profit, then it's a problem. And they're both like pretty much the exact same category of women in my mind. Like, they're both famous, obviously in the public sphere. They look fairly similar. They both are Hollywood blank symbols, but one is hated on and one is demeaning towards women, and the other is a princess.
Grievance number 2. To be feminist or not feminist. So, this grievance has a few layers to it. This one is related to the accusation that she is catering to the male gaze, that she sings songs for boys, not girls, that she's debasing herself by being in a submissive position, and the worst one, that it glorifies DV. One of the top insults women have been lobbying at this cover is that it's not feminist, which I guess automatically makes it bad. All that tells me is that the people saying those things don't understand feminism, but the other reason this infuriates me is that the Sabrina Carpenter stans are not fucking helping. I think people don't actually know what feminism is. It's supposed to be women being allowed to make their own decisions, be comfortable expressing their sexuality. It's about taking our power back. I don't think you know what feminism is either, hun. This is a very 2010s choice feminist take, labeling anything you do or a certain woman does as feminist so that you don't feel a type of way doing it or consuming it or whatever. So I suppose if this is the consensus of some Sabrina stans, I can understand this response to an extent, but this response takes it to another level that is also not feminist. In fact, it's anti-feminist. People are complaining that this is choice feminist bullshit while also misrepresenting feminism and using feminism to slut-shame Sabrina. This TikToker is complaining not just about the album cover, but also the Juno poses and the Lolita-inspired photo shoot. She is saying that Sabrina couldn't possibly be a feminist because she's a slut. Last I checked, slut-shaming derives from rape culture, which feminism tends to have a problem with. Why are you perpetuating misogynistic slut-shaming talking points? The other reason this grinds my gears is because Sabrina never said she was a feminist as far as I know. That idea has mostly sprung from her stans who don't understand feminism. And the people angriest about this are conveniently not referencing anything Sabrina has said herself. She didn't put hashtag empowerment or hashtag feminism in the IG post. I am not saying you can't critique the cover. Nothing is above criticism. It's just these same people are saying that it would have been more feminist had she been the one in the dominant position instead. And it's like, okay, well, that's just classic 90s girl power feminism, which isn't better and also isn't feminist. Feminism isn't about women dominating men. This is why I truly don't like Sabrina Carpenter. She always plays that Lolita stereotype. It's so gross. My girl, make a song for girls, not for boys. LMAO, not you guys just realizing she only caters to the male gaze. Literally dresses up like some housewife oppressed woman from the 50s. I worked one of her shows, and this is how most girls dress to attend, like teenage girls, and parents taking their younger than teenage girls. I watched some of the show and was like, yeesh. What oppressed 1950s woman was wearing those heels? It's called an aesthetic. I like 50s aesthetics. I love Grease. I love the music and the cars and the diners, all the superficial stuff. Doesn't mean I want to go back to the 1950s. I don't really want to go back to any decade, because from what I know about American history, shit has always been bad. The aesthetic is pleasing to look at, and it's not like that's the only aesthetic she embodies. She also dabbles in 70s and 80s aesthetics. Many of her outfits and hairstyles in the Man-Child music video are very 70s, 80s. But I don't see anyone talking about that. Saying she dresses like an oppressed housewife is insane to me. How does she look oppressed? That's a very specific descriptor. The problem is, rapey sexist men will get off on this and love this, even if it's ironic. I've seen some people saying she's poking fun at the bitch stereotype she gets. People won't see this as art or understand it as a deeper meaning. They'll see a woman in a derogatory, submissive position. She's playing into the hands of sexist men and portraying herself as a bitch. And for what? To own the incels? They love this. Yes, exactly. I saw several comments on her Instagram post from men that were saying things like, "Yes, woman, on your knees." And their profiles all showed that they were Andrew Tate fans, etc. Very presumptuous of the first commenter to assert that no one will see this as art or a satire. This is not on the same level, but it is very reminiscent of the people claiming that Cuties was going to attract pedophiles. It's just illogical. First of all, I'm pretty sure it's not just men who find Sabrina hot. There are queer women, non-binary people who would find this hot as well, and would possibly use this photo as their lock screen. And from what I've heard, a lot of men online don't find her to be hot anyway. Second of all, if incels or sexist men do love this, so what? How is she supposed to control that? People can find anything hot. A man could screenshot me in this bathing suit and use that as his lock screen. Am I a terrible person now for wearing a bathing suit in a video because of that possibility? Should I be shamed because of that, because a man might jerk off to it? Does that make any sense to you? Like, sure, it definitely makes more sense to blame a woman for men's fantasies. Yeah, it makes total sense. So feminist of you to do that. You're really setting women forward with that mindset. Congratulations.
Congratulations! 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 Congratulations!
The next layer of this grievance seems to mostly center on the fact that there is a man there at all and that she is on her knees, possibly preparing to blow him. And for the people who keep saying they hope the man is actually her, it is a man, unfortunately. Not sure why this hasn't caught more people's attention, but my friend sent me a TikTok of like a billboard that shows clips of this photo shoot, I guess. And you'll notice he has on a blindfold, and I'm not a kink expert, but I'm pretty sure that could mean he's also a sub. I don't know. I don't really care. When I first saw this photo, I also had the knee-jerk response of, oh, this is very male gaze, until I started reading comments from people saying things like, is this a humiliation ritual? Why is she degrading herself like this? It's inappropriate in today's climate. I just feel sad for her now. And I just don't like that. It bothers me a lot. I'm really tired of this thing that some women do where they want to slut shame women who suck dick. I know why it happens, but it's just so unnecessarily mean. Like, oh, if you like that, that's because you're a pathetic slut who allows herself to be degraded by men. Like, oh, okay, I guess you got me all figured out. I couldn't possibly find this pleasurable. I'm just a pathetic, insecure slut whose self-esteem is so non-existent that I would debase myself by giving head. Like, how can you get up there on your high horse and declare that she's being anti-feminist? Meanwhile, you're looking down on her and deciding that she's degrading herself, she's not enjoying herself, and that you feel sad for her? Like, what the fuck? Lots of women enjoy performing oral sex on cis men, and people have done it since the beginning of time. This oral sex shaming comes in at both sides, though. Cis-het men are also shamed sometimes for eating pussy. Like, there's a whole episode of The Sopranos where they imply that eating pussy is so gay that Junior beats up a woman over it when his friends find out he's a pussy eater. There's this idea that you're giving away a part of yourself if you get on your knees. And if you're the type of girl who does that, you will be viewed as a fuck doll who's down for anything. And you don't need to ask her for consent on anything because she is no longer a person to you. Thank Monica Lewinsky.
And interestingly, here was TikTok's response to this photo. Again, this is just the photo at this point. We don't know what the music is other than man-child. We don't know anything else. So this is all just fans guessing and having these conversations.
Sabrina, girl, I love you, but get off the ground. You're serving Monica Lewinsky?
Yeah, girl, stand up. Get your balance back. You should also be taking balance major because it's healthy.
That's so weird. What do you mean it's giving Monica Lewinsky? Monica is not the first and only person in the history of history to suck a dick. It's a normal thing that a lot of people do. Having your hair pulled is also something a lot of women consent to and like in the bedroom. Like with spanking, with adults, it can be a form of abuse if the person is not consenting to it. This sort of leads into the alarmist glorifying DV complaints. Kiara Briog, who made 2 videos talking about both Sabrina and Sydney, felt this photo was especially inappropriate with everything going on with Diddy and Cassie. People left comments on Sabrina's IG post saying how they watched their mom being abused and they find this album cover revolting. Kim Foster from For Harriet did a piece about the album cover, and she points to Madonna's 1984 MTV Music Video Awards performance as setting the blueprint for pop stars using sensational tactics to rile up the public. Though Like a Virgin was Madonna's second album, this moment started her decade spent ducking slings and arrows. This is how Madonna became Madonna. This set the blueprint for the music video era. Becoming a pop du jour requires diligence and, yes, obedience. Man's best friend. Get it? However, if you're a woman artist who wants to be more than a flashpoint, you must pick a fight. Not with your fans, not with fellow pop girls, with power. You cannot become an icon without becoming a lightning rod. Surely Sabrina knows that. This isn't a clumsy grab for attention. It's not even shocking, really. Sabrina, our fun-sized pop duchess, not a princess, not yet a queen, isn't trying to escape the culture war. She's firing straight at it. But instead of challenging the church, Carpenter is challenging the algorithm. And these times you have to be unignorable. And a tiny blonde woman dressed like a mid-rate courtesan, performing submission with deadpan irony, that is unignorable. Madonna used Catholic guilt as her foil. Carpenter plays off young people's self-seriousness, offering a glittering alternative to a generation's carefully filtered restraint. Like Madonna, Sabrina is also doing it during a conservative turn in American culture. The GOP is back in control. Overt racism is cool again. Books are being banned. Gay and trans rights are on the chopping block. Children are being orphaned. Misogyny has rebranded itself as lifestyle content, and women are under intense pressure to either align with respectable femininity or disappear. Yes, this is clearly satire, but it's not exactly a fun image. Notice how this album cover is muted compared to anything we saw during the short and sweet era. There's no shimmer or gloss. The neutral color palette adds to its lo-fi banality. That's another change. This image constructs Sabrina as more womanly versus the coquettish appeal of her breakout era. The vibe is like one of those Polaroids you find rummaging around a lonely shoebox at the back of your parents' closet. Awkward. But this one isn't hidden away, it's distributed to audience far and wide for global consumption. Have you no shame? Which is why it hit a nerve. I saw a comment on a poll I made about this cover a few weeks ago where someone tried to compare the cover to pictures of animal abuse and that people's kinks should not be shoved down people's throats. It's a very no kink at pride kind of argument. And even if I sympathize with people who genuinely were put off by this picture, that is an absurd thing to say. Just because you see something posted somewhere and it triggers you doesn't mean that thing should no longer exist, nor does it mean it's inherently sinister. People are assigning the most egregious intentions to this cover that they possibly can. Like bringing Cassie into this feels kind of manipulative and gross to me when we know that Cassie was being trafficked and abused. That's not what's happening to Sabrina. Just because a woman is on her knees or is about to go down on a cis man doesn't mean she's there against her will. And when it comes to the conversation of being triggered, it weirdly just reminded me of the drama around Netflix's Insatiable. When the trailer for the season 1 first came out, it also caused a huge wave of backlash from people with EDs who were triggered by the trailer and started a petition to get the show taken down. While I don't like Insatiable, I don't love that people petitioned to get the show taken down before it even came out. I think Netflix should have at least put up some trigger warnings at the start of the trailer, but I'm not super duper into banning movies or TV shows before they've even been released. Nor am I in favor of banning controversial media because it's controversial. I do think it's interesting that more people were defensive of Insatiable getting a bad rep before it was even released and not Cuties, but whatever. People online love to pick and choose when censorship is bad actually or when it's necessary. Grievance number 3. To be misandrist or not misandrist. On the other side of this, people are claiming that Sabrina's music is misandrist because she's usually singing about how men ain't shit and men are always getting killed off in her music videos, which I do think is kind of a funny, consistent theme in her work. The misandrist take is very stupid, but typical criticism from some cishet men who can't handle anything that is critiquing any type of man. I don't really care if she was making misandry music because misogyny is extremely pervasive and normalized in the music genre in general, and if Sabrina's music is supposedly misandrist, which it isn't, But if it was, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal to me because it doesn't even go that hard. Like, do y'all know what men used to rap about? Do you know what they're still rapping about? Just look up the lyrics to some Biggie songs or some NWA songs or Eminem. You will be horrified. If this is misandry, it's the lightest misandry I've ever heard. She is at best making some men feel a little bad by calling them bitches and man-children. I don't give a fuck, I'm sorry. Regardless of whether or not you think her music is misandrist or misogynist, Sabrina mostly seems to have female fans. These takes are frustrating to hear because I find Sabrina's music to be kind of cathartic as someone who also dates men. Did you just say you're finished, didn't know we started? Like, bitch, relatable. Even Please, 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 I love that she says this is more about her ego than her heart being broken because she knows as a woman anything bad he does will reflect badly on her character by everyone else. As many others have pointed out about Sabrina, a lot of her music traffics in themes of heterofatalism.
A glorification so much as just an accurate depiction of the way that men treat her. And even the title fits, man's best friend. She's being treated like a dog and yet also expected to always be pleased to see him and loyal and embodying idealized femininity at the same time. This fits into a concept that I think we can view this as running through a lot of Sabrina Carpenter's work. It's called heterofatalism. Heterofatalism is this idea that heterosexuality for women is incredibly difficult, dangerous, and horrible. That being attracted to men is essentially a curse. It's a nightmare, it sucks. But it's largely inescapable because they're heterosexual. Dating men is a constant series of horrors, but they can never escape because 1, they are attracted to men and want to be with a man, and 2, society expects them to continue going through this horrible, dangerous, degrading process of dating men. And Carpenter's new single, Man-Child, laments her attraction to men, specifically her attraction to what she dubs man-children, who are these immature, useless, stupid, irresponsible men that treat her badly, and yet she's continually attracted to them. She keeps falling for men like this.
Tracy Clark Flory has a great article about this on her Substack. Shout out to the commenter who alerted me to this article. It was great. She says, in a matter of days, Carpenter moved from this loving eye roll of a song to images of her kneeling at a man's feet, her hand being held almost like a leash. This feels totally consistent, actually. Again, what are you gonna do? Of course, Carpenter isn't selling candor, communication, and reciprocal understanding, nor is there any evidence yet that she is genuinely exploring or expressing kinky desires. But I do think she is using BDSM-adjacent imagery to tap into straight women's experiences with the trap of heteronormativity. Kink often involves fantasies of debasement. Loving straight men in patriarchy often involves actual debasement. The key difference being the presence of consent and negotiation. Heteronormativity doesn't negotiate, it demands and extracts. Carpenter is turning straight women's impossibly fraught feelings into playful theater. Of course, there is capitalism and commercialism at play here. Some will unironically celebrate Carpenter as a woman on her knees, but given her talent for camp, there's also potential for satire, subversion, and not to be underestimated, fun. This is not to perpetuate man-hating, men are trash rhetoric. I find it frustrating that women are not allowed to complain about their experiences with men without someone popping out of a trash can to remind us that not all men are like this, or maybe you're just picking the wrong guys. Like, sure, maybe. But also, we live in a patriarchal society where misogyny is universal and often goes unchecked. We live in a rape culture where women are both told to fear men and expect them to be terrible, but to still want relationships with them anyway. All of these things make dating difficult for everyone, but I can only speak from my experience as someone who dates cis men, and my experience hasn't been good at all. Bell Hooks lays this out very well in The Will to Change. She says how we don't want to speak the truth about men and that a lot of women's experiences with cishet men are bad. Stephanie Oboa, who I brought up in my Norbit video, has been very open in the past about her horrible dating life. I believe she's happy in partner now, so good for her, but for a while, most of her dating experiences were really terrible according to her. Part of why it was terrible is because she is a dark-skinned, fat black woman. How you look, your gender, your race, your weight can all determine how certain people are going to treat you. And I'm not saying conventionally attractive women don't also experience a lot of bullshit. We all do. dating sucks, especially now, but I think women should be able to be honest about their bleak dating experiences in a way that isn't just classifying all men as terrible, but as a way to point to a broader issue within heterosexual dynamics. People are so quick to be like, not all men are like this, so shut up. Like, no, I'm not gonna shut up. Misogyny has gotten worse, partly because leftists are really bad on feminist issues, and a lot of cishet men on the left who don't struggle to get women like to scapegoat incels as if they're the only problem. I am not saying men of older generations are better, but I am a Gen Z. Look at who I have to choose from. We've got incels and alpha males. You're telling me Gen Z women have to just shut their mouths about how dating men can be a real minefield when men are out here loudly expressing phrases like, your body, my choice? Sabrina's music is absolutely for women, not girls and not men. It is for grown adult women. She is singing about her experiences, her desires, and her complicated relationships with men. And going back to the previous grievance, that also doesn't mean she's performing for the male gaze. That is a gross misinterpretation of that term. You cannot objectify yourself. It demonstrates another instance in which people use terms that have actual meanings and completely bastardize them. Moving on. Grievance number 4. Too sexy for this discourse. Sabrina detractors have used this album cover in tandem with the Sydney Sweeney bathwater bullshit as targets for their disdain for the over-sexualization of famous women. I posted a poll a few weeks ago on what you guys thought of the cover. That poll got a lot of votes and a lot of comments. Thankfully, only a small percentage of you felt it was outright degrading, and many of you left some really interesting and insightful comments. One of you said, I think most people aren't objecting on genuinely feminist ground, like they're okay with her being sexual, just not like that. A very turfy position, but I can see the vague suggestions of logic. Most people are objecting because they don't want her being sexual, either because they want to keep their children totally ignorant and she messes with that, or because they're angry that women can deliberately incite sexual desire in them and then refuse to fulfill it, and then become celebrated, famous even for it, instead of shamed for being dirty whores. I agree with this, even though I would say at this point Sabrina is being shamed for being a whore, but they are correct. This demonstrates the way we still love to take on this paternalistic attitude toward women who are being sexual. You're trying to police how she exudes her sexuality, and as someone smartly pointed out in the comment section of Lasting Looks video about the Rolling Stone cover, you're just slut-shaming them with progressive language. This is why, while I agree with a lot of people who say white women are able to express their sexuality in a way where people will frame it as empowering, versus how when women of color, typically black women, express their sexuality are viewed under a much less favorable light, white women also get slut-shamed. They can only be so slutty before society decides they've had enough. Because cis conventionally attractive blonde white women are seen as the ideal woman, there is an expectation of class, not tackiness. And Sabrina being on her knees on the cover of an album as a man pulls her hair disqualifies her as a classy woman. So, lastly, before we move on, what are we actually mad about here? Sabrina recently released another photo for the album that she promises was approved by God. She was obviously joking, of course, but like I always say, just because something is a joke doesn't mean it isn't true, or that the person saying it didn't mean what they said. People keep comparing both Sydney and Sabrina to Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, who they also feel are setting women back 100 years. All of these grievances share 3 things in common. They're very reactionary, alarmist, and very prudish. Just like with the Cuties panic. Regardless of whether you were triggered, these takes are very sex negative and reductive. They are slut-shaming, and while I understand why feminists have issues with this kind of stuff, I just don't understand why we're suddenly okay with everyone just being blatantly misogynistic and just slut-shaming these women and buying into rape culture sentiments like blaming them for the ways men might sexualize them, or openly and shamelessly saying how sorry you feel for them and how they are participating in humiliation rituals. I don't understand why more people aren't calling that out as a QAnon dog whistle that leftists are just proudly repeating like it's nothing. Y'all are mad that society is going backwards and overt bigotry is becoming less stigmatized, but you're also peddling conservative misogynistic arguments. People are saying things like, Sydney Sweeney is made by men for men.
One person said, Sydney is a woman written by a man for men.
Like, are you kidding me? What a fucking vile thing to say about another human being. What is wrong with you? Why are y'all so angry at these women that you are engaging in patriarchal thinking and having the nerve to act self-righteous about it? When I was reading Reddit comments about the album cover, I kept seeing these bitter comments from people almost reluctantly stating how she and her team knew exactly what they were doing, and that she was just trying to drum up discourse. Which is true, but some people said it with so much contempt. Why? We live in a sex-obsessed culture where we know sex sells, and yet we get so upset when a woman happens to command the public's attention and or become more famous when she starts taking her clothes off. Sabrina has even spoken to this. It's not me who was posting about the Juno poses or the sexually explicit lyrics. You're doing that. You are the one who is obsessed with sex, and yet you're getting mad at me for igniting this not-so-secret obsession of yours. Like that comment I read earlier, people are mad that she has sex appeal, even though her sex appeal for a lot of them is the thing that alerted them to her existence in the first place. What I was trying to get at in the last part is essentially what Bernadette Barton said in that article, that pornification and purity culture are two sides of the same patriarchal coin. One cannot exist without the other. That is one of the themes in Cuties. Growing up in a sexually repressive environment is pretty much ensuring that those affected will more than likely have a deeply unhealthy understanding of sex that will not only increase their curiosity and fixation, but also their shame. You are ensuring that they will not feel comfortable coming to you if they have questions. They will look elsewhere. They will learn about the dirty things you don't want them to talk about. But then you will also act surprised and baffled if your teen daughter ends up pregnant, because you thought that not talking to them about sex meant that they would never find out about it. You act baffled when you find out about your kid's search history or crispy socks.
Going through all this stuff, but it looks pretty risky. You use so much lotion, but your socks sure are crispy.
Again, in a sex-obsessed society where anything that even remotely seems sensual can be deemed as pornographic. And because we are both obsessed with porn but also view it as the lowest form of art, that means it's bad. Feminist writer Jessica Valenti speaks to this Madonna whore, purity porn dichotomy in her book The Purity Myth, which deconstructs purity culture and perfectly illustrates the true goals and intentions behind it. The similarity between purity and porn culture, the way both fetishize women's sexual subservience, is what makes the virginity movement completely unable to analyze pornography in a progressive or helpful way. The movement has latched on to the mainstreaming of porn not because it cares about women and the way in which their sexuality is represented, but because porn is an easy scapegoat for what the movement perceives as society's ills, women having sex, as well as a convenient excuse to uphold the movement's regressive goals. The fact that conservative organizations conflate porn with sex toys and masturbation and female pleasure with obscenity reveals the true nature of their objections. These organizations blame progressive and feminist values because that's what they're fighting against, not real tangible problems that affect women. So instead of criticizing pornography from a perspective that seeks to help women, they end up reinforcing porn's sexist aspects. There's no doubt that the pornification of the United States affects young people adversely. But if young women are treating their bodies and sexuality as commodities, it's not because of porn culture. It's because of a larger societal message that tells them that their sexuality is not their own.
Oh, Michelle, that was an awesome wedding.
I know, it was so romantic.
It was great. Did you see Cousin Joe over there?
Dancing.
Yeah, he had a
I
great
did.
time. And the food was great too.
It was.
You know what though? Wow, I've been waiting on this night my entire life.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know what? I forgot something. It's a gift I've been waiting to give you. And, you know, I've saved this gift for you all my life. And, you know, a lot of people tried to get this gift from me, but I saved it just because I love you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You like them?
Brand new shoes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saved them just for you.
Oh, they even smell new.
Yeah, they've never been worn.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I see you got a gift for me.
Yeah? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Before I give this to you,
Okay.
I want you to know that I love you with my whole heart.
I know you love me. That's why we got married.
Every bit of me loves you.
Okay. Can I have it?
Yeah.
It's all right. Michelle, Michelle, what are these?
My sneakers?
But Michelle, what is this? It looks like the entire football team has been in these things. I mean...
I made them all wear socks.
Socks? Michelle, socks don't protect my heart. You can still get foot fungus with socks. I mean, but, you know, I saved my shoes for you. What happened?
There was so much pressure. I didn't know how to say no.
Pressure?
I'm sorry.
Michelle, do you know I had the entire cheerleading squad trying to get into my shoes, but I told them all no. I saved them for you.
I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about tonight. I wasn't thinking about you. I wish I could go back in time and make a commitment to be abstinent until marriage.
Do you remember the first time you were in sex ed? I do. Kinda. I was in the 7th grade, which means I was between 12 and 13. At my school, I'm not sure if this is how it is everywhere, but it probably isn't, but sex ed at my school wasn't its own separate class. It was a part of health class in general. So there would be a few weeks where we learned about drugs, then there was one where we learned about nutrition and eating healthy and the dangers of obesity. When it came time to transition to learning about our anatomy and menstrual cycles, all of us were instructed to get written permission from our parents to learn about sex. I remember when I was in this fashion class in like the 10th grade. Don't know why I was in that class, but the teacher, who I hated, she was such a bitch. But I guess she also taught sex ed, and she was talking to us about it for some reason one day, but she kept like giggling and saying sex in a whisper as if she was like an 8-year-old who just learned the word penis. I was like, lady, you are a grown adult. Why are you reverting back to childhood because you have to talk about sex? My mom was the same way. My mom is very religious and prudish, and any mention of sex, any question I had was met with cringe faces like, ew, 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 don't talk to me about sex. Why are you asking me about that? Don't they teach you about that in school? And today I say, well, yes, Mom, they did technically teach me about it in school. I remember when it was finally time to talk about doing the nasty, our health class teacher, who was also kind of a bitch, I'm sorry, began putting up "you can wait" stickers and abstinence till marriage posters and flyers on the walls. Then this very animated woman from, I assume, one of those evil crisis pregnancy centers came in, and I'll admit, she was good at her job. She was very charismatic and silly and knew how to get us to like her. There's actually an episode of Family Guy that perfectly portrays how these abstinence-only speakers act.
Now look, let's rap for a second. He's sitting informally like us. Let's hear what he has to say.
Jefferson High is our rival.
Sure, sex is fun, but you can't have it before you're married, even if you use a condom. Because not only do condoms fail 100% of the time, they're also majorly unsafe. Hey, you wouldn't put a plastic bag over your grandmother's head, would you?
No. I'm not going to pretend that I have a strong memory of everything she said or everything she did, but what stuck in my mind the most that I didn't realize until I got to high school was that they were straight up teaching us misinformation. This lady one time told us that taking birth control could possibly, but rarely, lead to HIV. Obviously that isn't true, but let's just say it is for the sake of this point. She's saying that it's rare, but that doesn't matter. She's saying it leads to HIV. Up until that point, we'd already learned about HIV and AIDS and watched documentaries about it, and so we knew that HIV and AIDS was bad news. It doesn't matter that she said it was rare. The only part of that whole speech she gave that we remember is birth control and leads to HIV. Like I said, she knew what she was doing, and she did it well. Because 12-year-old me was like, oh my God, that's crazy. I ate it all up. Every single thing they taught us, I ate it up like Pac-Man.
Ate it up like Pac-Man.
I remember going home and excitedly telling my prudish mother how they taught us to wait until marriage and her nodding her head and being like, good. Something that I will never forget though is when I told her about this baffling statistic that I'm sure you've heard of as well if you received abstinence-only education. Along with lying to us about the birth control pill, they also told us that condoms fail 99% of the time. 99%. Like, what the fuck? You think they'd say like 85%, to make it seem not so absurd? Diets fail 99% of the time, not condoms. But when I brought this up to my mom, she made this confused face and she was like, what? That's not true. And the reason it's so funny to me now is because I realized that should have been a red flag. if my anti-sex Christian mom is like, what the fuck to these wild ass statistics, who knows what else they're lying about. So I'll just say up top here that abstinence-only education has been proven for a few decades now to be ineffective. So we're not debating about that today. It in fact does more harm than good. But we keep giving money to these programs that lie to children about sex and their bodies and teach them how to slut shame. It's a course in which you are being low-key indoctrinated into puritanical thinking. These people talked about abstinence until marriage as if marriage was the ultimate contraceptive. This 1991 documentary called No Second Chance is, dare I say, pure Christian purity culture propaganda. It starts off with this really tragic and sad story about a married couple and their child contracting AIDS from the father after they got married, though his mother suspects he must have gotten it before. Both of the parents died and the son went on to live with his grandparents, but his time is limited and he is in constant pain every day. It's really sad. They interview AIDS patients, one who would rather love the Lord and have AIDS than not love the Lord and not have AIDS.
I would rather have AIDS and have the relationship that I have with Jesus Christ than not have AIDS and not know Jesus at all.
What? So to plug another video of mine, my Ricky Lake video centered around an old episode of the famous trash TV talk show, where several women who were proud sluts basically came on stage to defend themselves against an audience ready to call them disgusting whores who will be too used up for a respectable man to be interested in them. I got a few comments from people saying that it was the 90s and this was during the AIDS panic. There was a lot of misinformation at the time about how one could contract AIDS, which didn't help. And these women were being unsafe. A lot of them said they didn't always use a condom and they were having sex with different men according to them every night. Certified freaks 7 days a week. I was never trying to discount that. Part of why I made that video was to lay out the ways purity culture and rape culture can push people into this paternalistic self-righteous mindset that usually results in women being the main targets of their ire. These people don't actually care about these women's well-being. They don't like that they have the audacity to prioritize their sex lives. They don't like that they're not ashamed of being sluts, and so they shame them with love. Abstinence-only education essentially does the same thing. One of the things they'll ask you in abstinence-only education is, have any of you ever had sex? Some people will say yes, very few, but there will be some. But the whole point of asking that is to shame. The Crisis Pregnancy Center lady wasn't going to then ask if they used a condom, nor was she going to give those teens tips on how to make sure to stay safe in the future. No. The Crisis Pregnancy Center lady is asking because she wants you to redeem yourself. She wants you to know that it's okay if you've already had sex, just as long as you never do it again. Until someone puts a ring on it, of course. These people do not care about the well-being of people living with AIDS or HIV. They're only concerned insofar as they can use them as cautionary tales. They're not people anymore. They're dirty, sinful people who made bad decisions. They're cautionary tales, stories to scare the teens straight. Literally and figuratively. They scared us by showing us how gross it would be if you got genital warts or gonorrhea. So not only is having sex before marriage bad, and not only is being a slut even worse, but if you catch something like HIV, now you must forever be shamed for having this virus. The doc is literally called No Second Chance. It's just an endless amount of shame that teens were meant to fear ever experiencing. But these messages, while dressing themselves up as just concern for your health, are not only false but damaging. What are we meant to take away from the Dirty Shoes video? It's supposed to be about how you should wait. That's what they tell us, but we know that's not true. It's trying to scare the teens. If you have sex before marriage, you will now be the living embodiment of a dirty shoe. I remember in high school when I took another class that involved sex ed, and they had another crisis pregnancy center lady come in to speak to us. There was one time she came in and she did this weird experiment. She had two girls come up to the front of the classroom. She gave one of them an Oreo, I believe, and the other a glass of milk. She then handed the glass of milk to the girl with the Oreo that she was chewing but wasn't supposed to swallow. She was told to spit the Oreos into the glass of milk. The crisis lady then handed the glass back to the other girl and told her to drink it. Obviously, she said no defiantly, but what was the purpose of this? It was basically a more elaborate version of the "you are a piece of gum" speech. Having sex before marriage taints you and makes you a dirty shoe, a chewed up piece of gum, and mushed up Oreos in a glass of milk. How is that helpful for anyone's health? I've made this comparison before, but it's like with thin people who concern troll fat people. They'll be like, you're a disgusting hunk of lard and you're gonna die before you're 30 and it's gonna be your fault. And then when the fat person is like, hey, that's really hurtful, they'll be like, I'm just concerned about your health. Like, is that how you show concern, Susan? Because if it is, I don't want your concern. The No Second Chance documentary advises teens to never use any kind of contraceptive and that safe sex is a myth. The woman hosting the doc literally says that marriage to one person forever is the only way you can stay safe from those dangerous sexually transmitted diseases. Even though not using a condom is the thing that will increase your risk of getting those things. Like, she compares a condom to Russian roulette, and it's like, bitch, the real Russian roulette is having unprotected sex. What are you talking about?
Just teach abstinence. They taught not using protection. They acted like it would be worse to use it than to.
We've all been hearing a lot about safe sex. If there's such a thing as safe sex, then what's all the hassle about? I mean, what are we worried about anyway? And what is safe sex? Using protection, okay? What would that protection be?
Condoms.
You know, the fail rate for condom use is 10 to 20% when used to prevent pregnancy. 10% for adults, 20% for teenagers. Well, when you consider that you can only get pregnant a few days out of every month, and you can get infected with the AIDS virus, how many days out of every month? Every day.
I sit here almost appalled at the newspapers every day and these various headlines that talk to the issue of having safe sex. I think this whole issue of safe sex is indeed a myth. The idea that condoms are going to make it safe for us to continue to live highly promiscuous lives, I think is ridiculous.
Only having sex with one person in marriage, in a monogamous relationship for life, for as long as you live. That's the answer to the problem. You don't have to worry about disease at all when you do that.
What if I want to have sex before I get married?
Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die. And you'll probably take with you your spouse and one or more of your children.
So not only are we being lied to here, we're also being told what to do, how to live our lives. We're being told that if we want to have sex, we must first off be straight, we must get married, and we must stay with that one person for the rest of our lives. So what happens when you do wait and get married and finally have sex? Well, according to psychologist Jonathan Brady in a piece titled On the Consequences of Sexual Abstinence, they say, mechanically, sex has a lot of moving parts. Understanding the intimate choreography of sex, like eye contact while synchronizing thrusts, and how to navigate your and your partner's bodies, like positioning oneself to avoid leg cramps, but not make your partner's legs fall asleep, is its own unique education. With both parties waiting to have sex, that means there will be a long learning process of awkward, anxiety-inducing, fumbling, and uncomfortable sexual encounters to go through with a partner, and either knowing what could be better and what better actually looks or feels like. Rarely do I hear of persons who are waiting until marriage for sex discussing the beginning of their marriage as including or expecting lots of awkward, uncomfortable, if painful sexual activity. Consequentially, and skipping ahead a bit to the emotional domain, the feeling of vulnerability when naked and touched is heightened. Now you feel about your own body, your weight, your musculature, your sizes, your smells, your self-worth, your physically naked self, because it's own delicate territory that both you and your partner are now navigating without ever having navigated before. Without knowing better, you are at greater odds for emotionally and physically hurting each other. Being that it'll also be your first time having sex, the impression that your first partner leaves on your body and how you feel your own body from their touch will be even greater, and will have more of an impact on your sexual identity. It is hard to feel confident and capable in one's own body, especially without the thoughts or ideas of others being imposed on your body. Harder still when no one in the room has experienced being naked or engaged in sexual activity with another body. And distinguishing your thoughts, doing so makes sex, your sexual identity, and your sexual experiences all the more nuanced. To not miss the person for the parts, but to see the person in all the parts. Also, if you're being taught that sex is dirty, do you seriously think that's just gonna go away once the person gets married? Do you seriously think that this person who has been told that sex outside of marriage makes you a dirty shoe is gonna have a healthy understanding of sex? Because they're also being told that masturbation is also a sin, even though it's the safest sex that anyone could have. So you're also being taught to be ashamed of your body, to be ashamed of any sexual feelings you might have. Even though I went to a secular school, and even though they made sure not to mention religion or Christianity when we're being taught lies, it doesn't matter. Christianity is baked into our culture, if you didn't know. Everything always comes back to Christianity. The sin of gluttony and this idea that not eating is holy and is penance for God and not an eating disorder. There's supposed to be a separation between church and state, and yet churchy right-wing puritanical ideas are being taught in secular schools. It's no wonder that Gen Z has a terrible relationship with sex, because we are one of the main generations who got hit the hardest, I feel like, with this abstinence till marriage bullshit. But you know, you can thank good old Reagan for that, because everything also always comes back to Reagan. To this day, people who call themselves progressive are absorbing elements of this "you better be prepared to die" mindset when it comes to trying to dictate how people live their lives and enforcing things like separatism. And as my friend Traz Discourse has said, respectability
will excuse a man abusing women if he says that it's a kink thing, which has not been my experience. A lot of radical feminist communities, online and modern ones mostly, like back in the day, things were a little different, but especially nowadays in online radical feminist communities, these communities think that women are stupid. They don't like women. They hate women. And they think that women are too stupid to understand their big-brained ideas about how women are actually inferior and stupid and weak and need to be protected in separate spheres. Oh, sorry. Not separate spheres, like the Victorian ideology about how women are weak and pure and need to be protected and sequestered from public life for their own safety. No, not that. No, these are female safe spaces, biological women only, to protect women because biological males are so much stronger and smarter than we are that we must be protected from them. It's different. It's feminist. I say this all the time, but so much online ideology nowadays is this old school Victorian sexism about how women are weak and pure and need to be protected from male corruption and power by being sequestered away from public life. It's just that, repackaged using leftist and feminist buzzwords. That is not feminist.
So, what do Britney Spears, Mae West, and Sabrina Carpenter have in common? All three are blonde white girlies who became household names as a result of their sexualized images becoming a part of their brand. All have been at the center of moral panics around sex, and all three expose the hypocrisy of people who perpetuate those panics. Between Mae West and Sabrina, the similarities are much more striking. Mae West was short and sweet, just like Sabrina. She was 5 feet tall. Both of them knew exactly how to rile up the public, and like Sabrina, or at least like Sabrina's music, was very sex positive. Most of her movies centered around her being a slut with every man she comes into contact with.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I see a man in your life.
What, only one?
Now, take care of these men.
Yes, give them all my address.
You were wonderful tonight.
I'm always wonderful at night.
Similar to Sabrina, Mae got a pretty early start when it came to what she would end up doing for the rest of her life. She performed in churches and talent shows, later on performed in vaudeville as a teenager. The cool thing about Mae West is that she was kind of a feminist. I don't know if she used that word. It was the early 1900s, but she was in favor of women's rights, and as she continued to grow as an actor and performer, she started writing her own plays. This didn't pose too much of an issue until years later in 1926 when she wrote the play Sex. That's what it's called. Which landed her in jail for obscenity for 10 days. But Mae West, being the bad bitch she was, wasn't exactly upset, and happily went to the doghouse knowing it would generate a lot of publicity. Before she scandalized the movies, West scandalized the stage. Her first play in 1927 was simply titled Sex and actually wasn't about sex but about lust, specifically the contradictory dynamics in which male lust is perceived versus female lust. As Anna Bogoskia says of her in her book Unlikable Female Characters, Mae West's name became synonymous with sex. This video is not getting monetized. Unlike Sabrina, Mae West was not considered conventionally attractive. I mean, she's hot to me, but maybe I just have good taste. Just hear what Tyra Sampter Willow has to say about Mae West in a New Yorker article from 1928. If you've seen Mae West on the stage in Diamond Lil, running 8 months now, and tickets on sale for New Year's Eve or in Sex, which ran 11 months last year, you probably picture her as a large woman, a bit gross looking. She's neither large nor heavy, almost slight, except in personality. At that, she is probably the only woman in America who doesn't want to look thin. She feels that curves are far more appealing than angles, and won't accept photographs that do not show her a bit more voluptuous and rounded than the slim silhouette the modern woman has succeeded in making popular. May went on to become, at the time, the highest, not one of the highest, but the highest paid actresses in Hollywood. I probably don't have to tell you, though I was not aware of how cool Mae West was until reading this book, but Mae West, like purity culture, is sewn into pop culture. Despite making just 13 film appearances between 1932 and 1978, her sultry on-screen persona influenced a wide range of artists including Salvador Dali, who created the Mae West lip sofa, and the Beatles, who immortalized her through Sir Peter Blake's artwork on the album cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. Imagine furniture being modeled after your lips. Mae and Sabrina both, and Mae probably more so, were very much in control of the image they wanted to put forth. Mae wasn't being forced by anyone into becoming a sex-positive icon. Mae clearly liked to fuck and wanted to brag about it. Flaunt it even. If there's anything we know about America, is that they do not like that shit. Enter the infamous Hays Code. The catalyst for the Hays Code came from a multitude of things. It was partially a backlash to the sexy, roaring 20s. Two instances that gave Hollywood this air of debauchery and depravity are the case of Roski Fatty Arbuckle, the murder of filmmaker William Desmond Taylor, and the overdose of Wallace Reed. Pre-code Hollywood films, as they were called, were on the brink of death. Hollywood was a little scared that the government was going to get involved, and so they brought on William Hays by the then Republican President Warren G. Harding. The Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America was formed, and they tried to put together a document of don'ts and be carefuls, which is so funny to me.
So, obviously, another one of the don'ts is criticism of religion.
But only the Jesus ones. You can make fun of everybody else. It's fine.
Yeah, certainly nobody was upset about making fun of, like, quote-unquote snake charmers.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
So, yeah, the be carefuls, some of the things on that were sedition, surgical operations, and, of course, excessive or lustful kissing. Be careful. So the don'ts and be carefuls, they don't make much of an impact, particularly because after the Wall Street crash in 1929, the box office plummets and the studios are like, we gotta sell sex. Like, it's the one thing that's still selling.
Wonderful. I love knowing that.
But then a new villain enters our story.
Oh my God.
And he is an anti-Semitic Iowa senator named Smith Brookhart. And he proposes that the film industry needs to be regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And as reasoning for this, he talks about how power in Hollywood is consolidated by what he calls, quote, bunches of Jews.
Naturally. I would expect nothing less from our Iowa senator.
Yeah. And so, not everybody was wording their opposition to Hollywood in this way, but there was a sense that the film industry was so amoral because they had so little Christian influence in positions of power. They basically just had Will Hays, and people had stopped listening to him. It's 1929, 1930. They're adding in sort of more sexy chorus girls and more gangsters and things like this to get people to come back to the movies after the box office crash. And protests from the Catholics and the Christians and the anti-Semites are just getting louder and louder as movies are getting more racy again. So Will Hays is like, well, Jason Joy didn't do it. So he brings in Martin Quigley, who is the publisher of an Irish Catholic trade magazine. And Martin Quigley calls a priest named Father Daniel Lord, and they together write what becomes known as the Production Code or the Hays Code.
Wow. Not one normal name yet have we encountered.
I mean, they all kind of sound like Simpsons characters, right?
Yes. Oh my God.
So the Production Code does include versions of a lot of things that were in the don'ts and be carefuls, but it's really specifically written to allow Catholics to feel seen. And at the same time, because there are still people who hate Catholics.
Right. They're like, people are prejudiced against us, so we'll fix that by being prejudiced against you. It's perfect.
Well, the code is very calibrated so that Catholics will feel like they're having, a hat tip to them, but people who hate Catholics won't be pissed off.
Wow. What a country.
One of the funniest ones on the don'ts list is white slavery. So does that mean other types of slavery were okay to show? Like, why specifically white slavery? Can you clear that up for me, Hays? However, lacking a strong enforcement mechanism, the Hays Code still failed to measurably affect the content of Hollywood films, and pressure on the industry continued to rise. The situation reached a crisis point in 1934. That year, a number of Roman Catholic prelates formed the Legion of Decency, which created its own film rating system and called for boycotts of films it found offensive. Given that studios were more economically fragile as a result of the Great Depression, they were also more vulnerable to activist actions. As a result, Hayes established the Production Code Administration as an organ of the MPPDA to enforce adherence to the code. Joseph Breen, a former journalist and diplomat and himself a staunch Roman Catholic, was hired to head the PCA. This was also after films at the time were lawfully deemed as not art, for lack of a better word, and so weren't protected by free speech. This, as you can expect, limited a lot of filmmakers' creativity and really fucked up their stories. They were required to write narratives that ended with the bad guy getting their comeuppance and the good guy winning. It also kind of fucked up Mae West's career. This joyfulness made her a menace. The National Legion of Decency was formed months after the release of I'm No Angel, and they cited Mae West as a major reason for the organization's creation as an agent of chaos who was corrupting our morals and promoting sex mania. Interesting. See, the man behind the Hays Code felt that depicting things like sex and drug use would lower the morality of the audience who was viewing it. This is from the first section titled General Principles.
Theatrical motion pictures, that is, pictures intended for the theater, as distinct from pictures intended for churches, schools, lecture halls, educational movements, social reform movements, etc., are primarily to be regarded as entertainment. Mankind has always recognized the importance of entertainment and its value in rebuilding the bodies and souls of human beings. Working principles. No picture should lower the moral standards of those who see it. This is done A, when evil is made to appear attractive and good is made to appear unattractive. B, when the sympathy of the audience is thrown on the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, sin. The same thing is true of a film that would throw sympathy against goodness, honor, innocence, purity, honesty. Note, sympathy with a person who sins is not the same as sympathy with the sin or the crime of which he is guilty. We may feel sorry for the plight of a murderer, or even understand the circumstances which led him to his crime. We may not feel sympathy with the wrong which he has done. But it has always recognized that entertainment can be of a character either helpful or harmful to the human race, and in consequence has clearly distinguished between entertainment which tends to improve the race, or at least to recreate and rebuild human beings exhausted with the realities of life, and entertainment which tends to degrade human beings, or to lower their standards of life and living. Hence, the moral imperative of entertainment is something which has been universally recognized. It enters intimately into the lives of men and women and affects them closely. It occupies their minds and affections during leisure hours, and ultimately touches the whole of their lives. A man may be judged by his standard of entertainment as easily as by the standard of his work. So, correct entertainment raises the whole standard of a nation. Wrong entertainment lowers the whole living condition and moral ideals of a race.
Now, I don't disagree that the media has an impact on us as a society. That's basically the thesis of my whole channel. However, I am fascinated by this. Because of this thinking, they essentially felt all movies should be rated G. They should be able to be consumed by everyone, and not only that, but it should also always have a positive and wholesome message that doesn't portray religion or religious leaders or cops as villains. Thank God we solved that problem. They wanted films to reform the nation by telling them how they should think and feel about the world. Slutty female characters whose stories didn't end in some kind of tragedy or retribution were cut from the script. Famously, the movie Babyface had a rather sex work positive message until the censors came in, whacking their rulers and said no.
What chance has a woman got?
More chance than men. A woman, young, beautiful like you, can get anything she wants in the world because you have power over men. But you must use men, not let them use you. You must be a master. not a slave.
See, instead of that, they censored the scene and completely reversed the message of what that man was saying.
It tells the scandalously lurid tale of a girl who works at her father's speakeasy/brothel, who takes the opportunity to leave town just as soon as her father dies in an industrial accident. But before she heads off to the big city, a kind-hearted man sits her down and warns her not to use her sexuality to get ahead.
A woman, young, beautiful like you are, could get anything she wants in the world. But there is a right and a wrong way. Remember, the price of the wrong way is too great. Go to some big city where you will find opportunities. Don't let people mislead you. You must be a master, not a slave. Be clean, be strong, defiant, and you will be a success.
Pretty wholesome, right? Turns out that was the edited version of that speech, written by none other than Joseph Breen himself.
It's one of those things where it's easy to look back and laugh, like, oh, they were so silly back then. But Hollywood producers still do this. Scenes in movies get changed around all the time. Things get taken out at the request of producers, things get put in. And kind of like in the 1930s, if you're not willing to comply with those demands, your movie might not get funded. The Hays Code also limited the way queerness could be represented on screen. That is, until some rebel-rousers in the 1950s decided, you know what? Fuck the code. We're gonna do what we want, bitch. This rebellious attitude sprang from the 1948 Supreme Court case, the U.S. versus Paramount Pictures, which completely changed the way films would be distributed.
And by extension, made his office one of the most influential in Hollywood. If you look in the credits of every Hollywood film from 1934 to 1954, you can see the PCA logo. Without it, your movie didn't stand a chance. The PCA got to say which movies the studios could make, and since the studios own many of the theaters in the country, most audiences only had access to production code films. You could almost call this arrangement a monopoly, and some people did. 9 people to be exact. U.S. vs. Paramount Pictures was a landmark antitrust court case in 1948, in which the Supreme Court said this kind of monopoly was illegal and forced the studios to sell their theaters. Since the studios could no longer control what was shown, it opened up the floodgates for independent and European films, neither of which needed to abide by the code. The PCA quietly existed until 1967, when the Motion Picture Association of America took over, and American film switched over to a rating system.
And thus the MPAA was born, and the letter rating system became the template for how we rate films today.
In 1968, the MPAA chairman Jack Valenti instituted a voluntary rating system with 4 levels. G for general audiences, M for mature audiences, R for restricted, no one under 16 without an accompanying adult, and X for adults only. A confusion over the M rating changed that rating to GP for general audiences with parental guidance, and then flipped over to our familiar PG. PG-13 was added in the mid-80s as a midpoint between PG and R after some outcry over Steven Spielberg films like Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, Poltergeist, and Gremlins all receiving PG ratings despite the amount of gore and unsettling images. Red Dawn would hold the honor as the first PG-13 film ever released. The adults-only rating of X was never trademarked by the MPAA. Filmmakers could self-classify their films under the X rating. This became a problem as the videotape pornography market exploded in the 1980s, exploiting the X rating with the logic that if one X was hot, then XXX must be really steamy. In September of 1990, the MPAA replaced X with NC-17. The movie rating system today is not without controversy. There's much secrecy and arbitrariness surrounding what separates a film from one rating to another. And there exists a silent economic censorship in place as many outlets and retailers refuse to carry NC-17 titles. But the internet, the brightest or perhaps filthiest bastion of free speech, is very much changing how films can be distributed and what kind of content is available.
There are a lot of people who try to say the Hays Code wasn't bad and it needs to come back, or it wasn't good or bad.
So I always see the code as something that's not good or bad, but something that is inevitable, and that allowed them to create a lot of great art. I mean, if you look at the movies made under the production code, I mean, we're talking about what? Hundreds of marvelous, creative works of art that people still look at today.
And I just think that's bullshit. Censorship is always bad. The Hays Code was bad. Sure, the Hays Code meant that filmmakers absolutely had to go to more creative lengths to make certain types of jokes and certain kinds of storylines that the Hays Code didn't approve of, but I don't think they should have been made to do that. Because while there are a lot of great movies from that time, think of the kind of stories we could have gotten. It's easy to look back and think that everyone was a prude, because no one fucks or curses, and that people didn't start doing that until the 1960s, but that's obviously not true. Just go and watch some of those pre-code movies, you'll see. I think it's bad to try and limit people's ability to convey the kind of messages they want to convey. Mae West would purposely put a bunch of dirty lines in her script so that they would overlook the lines that were less dirty. I don't think people should have to do that because of, free speech and all.
Women, and thereby the expectations of society on what women should be like, cannot be overstated. Real women are ditzy, flighty girls who fear sex and need a big strong man to teach them everything. Like how every woman you've ever met is, with no exceptions. In case there are any Andrew Tate stands who've happened upon my video, that is sarcasm. Not only were women's rights set back, but people of colour and queer people too. The antebellum South was glorified, and black people couldn't be heroes or heroines or anything other than servants if they weren't being outright vilified. Queer people were just starting to poke their heads out of their proverbial closet in the mainstream with Broadway plays and films about gay men and lesbians, but the Hays Code forced them all right back into it. Some of the most famous actors of the day were closeted in their real lives, known only to close friends until years later, or some even after they died. We know these stories now. Rock Hudson, Greta Garbo, Cary Grant, Joan Crawford, and a whole host of other people, including, most tragically, people like Ramon Navarro, who was murdered by two men who pretended to be gay themselves in order to get into his house. Portraying liberated women, queer people, and people of colour existing outside of where conservative values place them as deviant and mandating that they only be depicted in their rightful places, or, in the case of queer people, not portrayed at all, massively impacted all the social and political progress that had been done in the post-war 20s and early 30s. Governments being able to police art is dangerous. I don't think that should be a surprising or controversial thing to say, and yet I know there are people out there who would disagree. Conservatives in America generally don't want more government oversight, and yet a chunk of them are willing to let Republicans crack down on drag shows. That's literally art, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Do you want less oversight or not? Do you only like the crackdowns when they're coming for things you personally dislike? What about when they reach over that line? What about when they start coming for things you have a personal stake in? When do your principles stop being theoretical? There's plenty of shit I don't like in art. I don't like the normalization of gun violence. I don't like abusive relationships being portrayed as romantic. I don't like conservative comedy shows because they're allergic to comedy and it sends me out in the hives. But I'm not rallying every left-wing person I know to censor that art because, unfortunately, I think that art has a right to exist. I think it has a right to be critiqued, and I think the idea that you can't be wrong about a piece of art is dumb and something I'll probably interrogate in a different video. But unfortunately, I do think conservatives should legally be allowed to make their shitty fake centrist rom-coms, provided they're not literally being propped up by the government or military, because that's just propaganda.
Something I've picked up on throughout my life is the way people talk about sex versus violence. Going back to Cuties and Kim Foster's point about how child actors star in all kinds of movies that involve very serious and triggering topics, people kept freaking out over the TVMA rating on the film Cuties as if child actors haven't been starring in rated R movies for the longest. People bristled at the girls dancing provocatively and declared it was akin to adult films. They were concerned for their well-being because they were twerking. But were y'all concerned for the safety of the actors in it? Or Let Me In? Chloe Grace Moretz plays a 12-year-old vampire and kills multiple people. The bully character played by Clay Jensen bullies the shit out of this poor kid. The bullying in Let Me In is intense. I don't recall a moral panic arising over this movie due to the violence in it. I don't doubt there were people who opposed the violence, it just wasn't turned into a moral panic. Something I've come to notice about puritanical freaks is that they lack empathy to a disturbing degree and are extremely self-righteous.
Going to church doesn't make you a Christian anymore, and going to Pizza Hut makes you a pizza.
So what? What's that supposed to mean?
You're not a Christian.
Yes, I am.
If you were a Christian, your heart would not be this hard towards people that love you and towards counsel like this. Your heart is so hard. I have a hard time believing you're a Christian.
Well,
I say it's a church game and you don't know Jesus, and that's a far more serious problem than just what she's talking about. Although you are going to lose your virginity and you are probably going to get date raped and you probably are going to get trashed. God hates the crowd that you're running with. God hates what you're doing. God hates it that your heart is so hard towards him.
I don't know anything about this Dawson McAllister guy. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to his show. I don't know if he still has a job, but if I ever see him, it's on site. I can't fucking believe that he said such horrible shit on the radio, and then it made it into this documentary, and he was still allowed to just exist. Like, that is the most horrific, victim-blaming, disgusting, sexist, patriarchal bullshit I've ever heard, and I'm honestly, like, still kind of shocked that I heard that with my own 2 ears. Oh, he died? I guess that is a mission accomplished.
It's something you see with the Sabrina haters. If you've been following the album cover drama, you've probably heard people bringing up other female musicians like Britney Spears and Madonna as examples of women who receive similar backlashes to their work and their sexy brand. I believe a couple of you even compared this situation to the way parents talked about Britney Spears. Like that clip I showed in the last part with that politician lady saying that if she could shoot Britney Spears, she would. And it's like, okay, but why though? Why do you want to shoot her? You don't have to like the woman, but shoot her? You see what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. You're obsessed with purity and you're chastising this woman for being a slut, and yet you are making baffling comments in which you admit to wanting to shoot a young pop star for being too sexy. I've seen people making comments about Sabrina saying how they want to fight her. Brianni Claire, a YouTuber who did a great video on the album cover in defense of Sabrina, was also apparently receiving death threats. Again, this is coming from the same people claiming the album cover glorifies domestic violence.
Well, maybe it is stupid, but it's also dumb.
This is what I mean by the empathy factor. People also sent death threats to Maimouna Doucoure while preaching about how all of this is for the children. And yeah, I guess a movie with kids twerking is worse than those child stars saying all of those horrible tweets and comments you guys made about the film and the director. Same with Amber Heard. You claim you're mocking this woman in support of men who experience DV, while mocking DV in TikToks.
I don't understand. I don't understand, bitch. I don't understand. I don't understand, bitch.
We put anything sexual or anything remotely sexual at the top of the problems we as a society should be concerned about hierarchy of bullshit. Medusa recently made an incredible video talking about the rise of swerfism in young feminist spaces, and she correctly points out the fact that people fixate on sex trafficking as if it is the worst and most important form of trafficking we should be concerned about. And she uses Britney as an example of the ways people have decided that the reason Britney is traumatized is because of her former sexualized image when she was a pop star.
I don't remember the context, but somebody said, "This makes me think of Britney and how she had a mental health crisis, then conservatorship because of the trauma over being sexualized." Like, first of all, none of us can ever really know the cause or extent of Britney Spears' mental health crisis, for we are neither Britney Spears nor her doctors. But, as a longtime Britney expert, that is just such an unbelievably reductive way to portray her struggles when there were so many other very evident factors involved in the lead up to her conservatorship. She was in a very contentious and unfair custody battle. She had severe postpartum depression. She was being abused and possibly drugged by her quote-unquote manager. Her family was trying to perform religious conversions on her. Photos and videos of her made up roughly 20% of the entire paparazzi industry, etc., etc., etc. There were so many different things happening in Britney's life that saying she had trauma over being sexualized couldn't account for, to the point that I think portraying all of her struggles as coming from her sexualized image is just kind of dehumanizing. It puts an inappropriate amount of focus onto one thing about her public persona that you find uncomfortable, while ignoring all the other, frankly more impactful ways that she was being mistreated by the world around her. But people do this shit all the time, and I think it reflects the ways that we as a society treat sex like it's the ultimate corrupting force.
And yet it isn't. It's not this all-corrupting force. This is something that has plagued feminism for a while. This prudish anti-sex worker sentiment pushed some second-wing feminists like Andrea Dworkin to team up with the right because she foolishly assumed they had similar interests. There are a lot of feminists who felt porn was just inherently violent and treated women like pieces of meat, as Andrea has said. They wanted to abolish pornography altogether because instead of actually talking to porn stars and sex workers about their experiences or whether or not they like their jobs or the work they perform, they just took on this paternalistic stance of just assuming that they were all being mistreated and decided that taking away their jobs and their livelihood was what was best for them. Similar to the people getting mad at Lily Allen for having multiple abortions and are using their abortion stories as a way to weaponize their trauma against another woman, Andrea was in an abusive relationship where she was forced to do sex work. So needless to say, Andrea had a complicated relationship with sex, which is understandable. But this led to her joining hands with Christian evangelical conservatives who are not exactly against porn for the reasons that she is. However, this intense censorious crusade pushed a lot of feminists further right than they probably realized. In a 1985 New York Times article that came out during what has been called the Porn Wars, Andrea stated that she wasn't getting any institutional support from conservatives. But on the other hand, she added, when Jerry Falwell starts saying there's real harm in pornography, then that is valuable to me. When the so-called liberals who claim to care about torture in prison and right-wing countries bring themselves to understand that a woman being tortured for entertainment is also a violation of women's rights, I'll be very grateful. She was disappointed that other feminists disavowed her, and she felt the only reason they were disavowing her was because they didn't want to lose the libs. But as Eleanor Smeel, who is the president of now the National Organization for Women, said, one of the things constantly discussed is that we don't want to be in alliance with the right wing, Mrs. Smeel said. There is almost a fascist overtone to this thing, and we don't want to end up supporting alliances that are against equality for women. No fucking shit. What's funny is that while Andrea, amongst other feminists like Catherine McKinnon, were advocating for censorship, Andrea also seemed to be bothered by the fact that she was having trouble getting her books published because people really didn't want to fuck with her. She says, I don't know what these people are trying to protect if they won't let a political descendant publish, said Ms. Dworkin, who was working on a book titled Intercourse for the Free Press. Speaking is the only way I can earn a living. Oh, is someone trying to take away your livelihood, Andrea? Like, the hypocrisy is crazy. This is why you don't join hands with the right, dummy. I'm sorry, people are going to get mad at me for that, but I don't care. She was dumb for doing that. They all were. And while I'm not saying they didn't do anything good, this was in fact very bad for feminism. They felt porn, which does at times depict very violent depictions of sex, would rot men's brains and increase sexual violence against women. There are feminists now who have become more sex negative and taking on a Dworkinite view of sex work that is actually deeply sexist and condescending. If you're wondering, well, how? Let's just read this passage from Valenti's The Purity Myth. There's a strategy behind talking about young women as out-of-control girls gone wild or innocent damsels in distress. If we're no more than sluts or victims, then it's reasonable for society to make our decisions for us. Because if left to our own devices, we'd muck it all up. For those young women who are considered victims or potential victims, like the purity princesses or the young white suburban girls whose parents live in fear of MySpace stalkers and the corrupting influence of MTV, a daddy knows best paternalism is omnipresent. Whether it manifests itself in the form of forcing girls to take virginity pledges and go to purity balls, or even is propagated by a casual joke when parents laugh about how they're going to have to lock their teen daughter away until she's 21, the idea that these young women need protection spreads perpetually. Sex work has been around forever and it will always be around. Just like abortion. You can illegalize it all you want and try to legislate it, but they're gonna keep happening. Feminism's relationship with sex and sex work has always been messy because outside of anti-sex WAP feminism, it's not any better. Even leftists and pro-porn feminists have a tendency to view the sex work industry through rose-colored glasses and fail to acknowledge the legitimate problems in the industry. I found this Great Dissent article from 2016 by Claire Potter who discusses feminism and the sex wars. This provokes the question. If porn is not going away, if its production and consumption is becoming more female, if Candace Vidala had hoped women in porn are gaining more independence and power, how should feminists, both within and outside the industry, be engaging with pornography? The ideological polarization of the sex wars continues to color the conversations we have about pornography today. Feminist pornographers agree that mainstream porn is stubbornly discriminatory, usually exploitative and rarely scrutinized for abuses on the set. Although these inequalities are not unique to the pornography workplace, contemporary pro-porn feminists, in their zeal to defend pornography's sex-positive potential and debunk the stereotype that all sex workers are exploited, tend to sidestep such issues. So does FSC, which primarily defends the right of performers to work in porn and has created a system of self-regulation to keep producers on the right side of the law. On the other hand, the national feminist organizations that opposed porn back in the 1980s continue to conduct little research on women in the industry, except when they are victims of sex trafficking. Discussions of protection in the industry are therefore ideologically skewed depending on which side of the sex wars you're on. Sex workers are either empowered, erasing abuse in the industry or making workers hesitate to speak out, or by definition, exploited, socially vulnerable, controlled by men, and unable to speak for themselves. Few advocates on either side are currently listening to what performers themselves have to say about the working conditions in the porn industry and what they want and need to do their jobs without fear. I do think this is part of why younger generations are skewing more towards purity culture because, it's not like previous generations were getting it right either. We like to scapegoat younger generations when they exhibit behavior that feels too progressive or too regressive, and then act like we don't understand how we got here even though we've been here before many times. There was a backlash in the 1980s when Reagan became president. If you've read Backlash by Susan Faludi, which you should, I actually think that should be required reading at this point, but if you read it, you'll notice, wow, we've been fighting about the same shit for decades, huh? All this stuff about men being lonely and feminism ruining men's lives, or how feminism went too far, or falsely convinced women that putting your career before marriage and children was beneficial to them. Yep, they were saying that in the 80s too. Prominent feminists of the 70s like Susan Brown Miller and Betty Friedan came out against feminism. There was a backlash in the media from movies to TV shows to journalism. Articles upon articles being pumped out claiming that feminism ruined women's lives and how there was a man shortage, which was all meant to make women feel like shit. This is why I really hate this the past is the past bullshit, because it's not. The past is actually the present. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the past, which sounds dumb to say, but people don't actually seem to understand that. I remember years ago the way older people would just say things like, Gen Z is going to save us all, and just deciding that we were going to figure it out somehow on our own, and there's no possible way that we could backslide. Purity culture has come back with a vengeance because it never actually went away. And that's not Gen Z's fault. People forget that Gen Z is under 30. None of us are even 30 years old yet. We did not create this shitstorm of a society, we were just born into it. I get frustrated when older people are like, why is Gen Z so obsessed with aging? What do you mean? Did y'all dismantle any ideas around ageism in order for the younger generations to not pick that up? Because ageism is still prominent amongst a lot of people. Of course Gen Z is ageist, because we live in a deeply ageist society. Oh, why is skinny coming back? Because it never went away, what are you talking about? Was it weird and fucked up when a lot of Gen Zers were making TikToks mocking Amber Heard's testimony? Yes. Yes, it was. But you know who else was mocking abuse testimonies? Saturday Night Live in the 90s. They were doing the same thing, mocking people's abuse testimonies and sketches and not taking these kinds of issues seriously. Younger feminists emulating the separatist exclusionary politics of second-wave feminists is dangerous, but it's not something that is unique or new to younger feminists, as I literally just said. This is not new. They are saying the same shit as Andrea Dworkin. And I don't think people understand how this kind of stuff pushes people, especially certain women, away from feminism. I remember Yarze talked about Dolly Parton in a video she made about Rachel Zegler. And she mentioned how she was criticized so harshly by feminists because of how she looked, that turned her away from wanting to identify as a feminist, even though she supports women's rights. I won't be surprised if Sabrina Carpenter does the same thing. And you shouldn't be surprised either. And that's the end for now, because this video got way too long, so we'll talk about Sydney Sweeney, amongst other things, in the next part. In the meantime, go read some books and leave women alone, please.
Boy, I sure had fun at the pizza parlor tonight, Debbie.
Yeah, Matthew. That pizza pie was delicious.
Hey, watch out, crazy driver. That joker must have been from Jefferson High. They're our rivals.
Well, here we are at the makeout point.
Yeah. You want to go all the way?
Freeze! Now, who can tell me what Matthew just did wrong? I mean, besides not running over that Yahoo from Jefferson High.
They're our rivals. He's wrong because he wants to have sex and he's not married.
Bingo.